All right, good evening. I would like to call to order the September 12th, 2022 Lake Washington School Board meeting. Let the record reflect that all board members are present, as well as our 2 student representatives. The board values public participation and engagement in the meetings of our board, and these meetings will continue to be live streamed on the Lake Washington School District website. You are also always welcome to email the board at boardmembers@lwsd.org, to call us, to meet with us, any of the above. So with that, our first step is to entertain a motion to approve the September 12th, 2022 agenda.
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved by Director Choi and seconded by Director LaLiberty to approve the agenda as presented. All those in favor, please signify by voting aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Okay, so our first item on the agenda tonight is we are very pleased to introduce the selection of our 2 student representatives to the Lake Washington School Board. And the student representatives will act as a liaison for students and will provide information and input as the board conducts their work, evaluation, and decision-making. Our student representatives for 2022-23 are Evan Kurtz, a senior at Juanita High School and representative to the schools in Juanita and Lake Washington regions, and Shivani Sama, a junior at Tesla STEM High School, representing the schools in the Redmond and Eastlake regions. I would like to just give the opportunity for both of them to introduce themselves to everybody here. And I know you've already done that once before, Evan, but we're going to have you do it one more time. Please.
All right. There we go. My name is Evan Kurtz, and I'm very proud to be representing the schools in the Juanita and Lake Washington High School District. I believe that is a very diverse district, and so I'm very excited to be able to work with them to be able to ensure that we have equitable treatment for everyone in our area.
Sorry. Hi, I'm Shivani Sama, and I'm going to be representing the schools in the Redmond and Sammamish area, so Redmond and Eastlake. I'm really excited to represent the student opinion and hopefully be able to provide students with the changes that they want to see.
All right, thank you and welcome. So our next item on the agenda is an opening school report, and I will pass that to Dr. Holman.
So we have a whole team of people here to share with the board and celebrate the opening of the 22-23 school year. Deputy Superintendent Scott Beebe is here, and the team of our level directors, both our elementary and secondary level directors that support and help lead our schools. And so as the team gets prepared there, they annually come and provide an opening school report to share with us the highlights of students coming back. I think many of you in the room know what a celebration it has been this year to invite students back to our campuses. It's been joyous, it's been a celebration, and staff and teams across the district have done a tremendous amount to ensure that the student experience as they transition back this fall was quite tremendous. And so with that, I will hand it off to you, Deputy Superintendent Beebe.
We're struggling with the technology, but we'll get it working. So I have the distinct pleasure to introduce our level directors, our directors of elementary education and secondary education. They're working on getting the presentation up so you can see. It's been a pretty positive opening. I got to spend some time in schools last week. There's just a good energy in the schools. After a couple of years of really tough experiences for kids, it was really great to see so many families engaging. So the level director team is actually going to share a little bit more with you. These are our level directors: Sandy Dennehy, Steph Clark, Matt Livingston, and Whitney Meissner. Really intrepid group of people. They spend the majority of their time in schools coaching principals, working with staff, problem solving different issues, and could not be more proud to get to work with them this year. So I'm going to turn it over to you guys, and I will get out of the way.
Thank you, board members and Dr. Holman. I'm Steph Clark. I'm the director of elementary for Lake Washington and Juanita. I'm also a proud director of the Lake Washington Juanita Elementary Schools. And I want to echo what I've heard. It's been a real positive start. The words have been hopeful, optimistic, enthusiastic to start the school year. Teachers are thrilled. Teachers and staff are thrilled to start the year. That feels more typical this year. During Leap Week, I was able to get into every single building. The themes around Lake Washington and Juanita Elementary were really focused on building connections, creating sense of belonging for staff and children, and just a focus on wellness. And you can see there's a lot of team building activities at Thoreau Elementary going on. I think their theme is building forward. And in Frost, they're putting together puzzles, learning to work together, making sure that everybody understands that we all have a piece of this puzzle and we're all an important part of our school when we're solving problems. Dr. Holman and Dr. Hitch kicked us off on Tuesday for our MTSS work and inclusion work. And I have a photo of Audubon staff. It's a little, I think they're hamming it up for me, but they are working on an activity that was created on celebrations, things we're already doing that are including kids and pushing kids, and then some of the new practices that they're learning. And then this last week, we got to go in the buildings and actually see the kids in progress. And I know at the end of right before we opened at Lakeview, I was really excited to participate in a circle by the staff. And they all went around and listed one thing they want for their students to feel after the first day. And overwhelmingly, it was loved, connected, and belonging. So it was throughout that, and we saw it all week long in Lake Washington and Juanita schools. The Lake Washington elementary schools are all working on inclusion this year. They are welcoming back several families and students to their neighborhood schools. This morning I was at Rose Hill Elementary, and I got to welcome a fourth grader who attended Franklin in the Learning Center program, and he is now a fourth grade student at Franklin Elementary that gets to attend school with his kindergarten brother. Parents are thrilled, tears dropping down their eyes, so it's a really exciting connection. But we still have a lot of the typical things. Pigeon is welcoming the kindergartners back to school. We see some first graders using Play-Doh to write their names, and I had to take a picture of that lunchroom. I'm going to be honest, I hoped I would never see a lunchroom like that again, but we have 116 kindergartners at Rush Elementary learning the procedures of a lunchroom, and I was there to help them out Friday afternoon. And then I just thought I'd also, a lot of the schools are fully launching Parent Square, and they shared with me some of the feedback they're getting from parents, and it's a really great way to connect and make all those families feel like they belong as well. And I was gonna say, click it, but I'm in charge of that. Then the Juanita School program opened up. I was able to get to a couple meet and greets, and this is the Juanita Elementary meet and greet. It's one of our smaller elementary schools, but yet the families wrapped around the building. I mean, it was just a very long, tears down my eyes because second and third grade families, first time at a meet and greet, first time in the building. But I was really excited. And from what I heard, it was like that at every elementary school in Lake Washington. People were really excited to be engaged with their school community and welcomed into the classrooms. And then the students in the Juanita area, Sandburg Elementary, are doing the Marshmallow Tower in fifth grade, but again, working on the same things that the staff were working on, building community, building relationships, and really with the sense that we want all kids to feel like they belong.
Oh, okay, I think I can do that. All right, hi, everyone. My name is Sandy Dennehy. I am the Director of Elementary Ed for the Redmond and Eastlake areas. And I would echo everything that Steph has just talked about with the Lake Washington and Juanita regions. And our DLT theme this year was Growing Together. And it really took on a life of its own across the Redmond and East Lake regions of the district. So I got to attend a number of welcomes from the principals to their staffs, and John Hedin at Alcott showed what it takes to garden and how they can represent the work we do to support students and create an environment where students are going to thrive. Rebecca and Chemo, a new duo of admin, they paired growing together with Let Go and You Can Grow, symbolizing the mindset and embracing change, which we know is a theme as well. East Lake had their annual ELC PLC barbecue, and it is a big deal. They brought staffs from all 7 of the elementary schools together at Mead to eat, plan, discuss, brainstorm, reconnect with one another. It was a really amazing event, and the principals also have their own custom-made aprons. And in addition, there was a strong theme of equity, inclusion, social emotional well-being, and self-care that began Leap Week and really carried over into the first days of school. Oops, I have to go back one more. Sorry. Here we go. So it was clear by what you saw on the walls, in the classrooms, and the words you heard spoken when teachers were greeting kids, that all students, staff, and community were welcome and belong in their schools. The smiles and the laughter this year really resonated with me. It really felt like a new beginning, a new year, and one that's going to be exciting. Cairo was on site at Ella Baker on the first day of school and checking in on their first day, but also may have mentioned their new prestigious status as a National School of Character, which is really, really cool. We have patrol again, we have assemblies again, we have guests and volunteers can now be in our school, and thank you, Leah, for taking the time to visit a couple of schools with me at Dickinson and Barton. It was really fun to be able to walk you around. Actually, both of us were kind of walking around new in our roles together. And I may have slipped a picture of my youngest son, Tommy, who started kindergarten on Friday, and I got to see firsthand the excitement and energy radiating from the school staff, the kids, and also the disappointment that he came home and realized he had to wait 2 more days until he got to go back to school again. So this year, really, truly believe that we're off to a great start. The feel in the schools, and having been in our schools for a number of years, just felt different this year, and it felt good and positive, and just looking forward to a great year. Thank you. Whoa, that thing just... Sorry, Matt.
You're good. Perfect. Good evening. I'm Matt Livingston, Director of Secondary Education for the Juanita and Lake Washington regions. To echo the folks on my team, it's been a really great start of school in secondary as well. A lot of positive energy, a lot of optimism, and the top left picture, that's Lake Washington High School. That's about 50 students who are welcoming the staff back on the morning of the first day, and they had music. When I walked by, it was Dancing Queen, and you couldn't help but just bust a move, and then they got excited that I was dancing, and then they turned up the music, and it was great. The bottom left, that's the Lake Washington High School staff preparing for the students and their procedures to welcome them back. The top middle there, that's ICS, and again, messaging is really important, and so messaging around welcoming students, helping them feel included, knowing that they're part of the community, that we're excited to have them back into our buildings. We hope to show them that, tell them that, and then have signage that represents that. In the bottom middle, that's the Link Crew assembly for the 9th grade at Lake Washington High School. So it's another opportunity for students to be welcoming the new students to the school. And in the bottom right there, that's the orientation assembly at Finn Hill Middle School. The first day assembly, so that's 6th, 7th, and 8th grade all together. and they introduced the staff and played theme songs for each staff member. And the strategy there is to help the students connect with the staff, and so that they can start to build relationships with them. They see them as people and as supports, and not as scary strangers that they can't connect with. The top right, they won the Best Shoe Award. The Finn Hill is the Falcons, and that's a staff member who had custom-made shoes made, Falcon Pride, in their blue and gold colors. So there was no limit. In the middle schools, one of the strategies that the schools use is to have a staggered start. And so sixth graders would come first in the morning, but the seventh and eighth graders would come a little bit later. And the older students would be tour guides and welcoming committees for students. So in the top left, that's Rose Hill Middle School. And the students that are in the purple shirt, those are the web leaders who are taking the new sixth graders around, showing them around the school. Juanita High School had the same version, and it's called Flight School, where the students are given a passport, and on the paper in the bottom middle are different locations throughout the school. And as the students visited each of those locations, they would get a stamp, and by the end of the orientation tour, they would have seen all the important parts of the school. So different schools using different strategies to welcome back students, to orient them, to make sure that they feel comfortable and included. We had a brand new guest at Juanita. The Raven is now part of the school there. That's a brand new mascot costume that was unveiled a couple weeks ago. And one other strategy in the bottom left there, that's Finn Hill Middle School. If you want students to enjoy themselves and see the staff as fun people that they hopefully can trust, you do carpool karaoke. And that's what they did. And every staff member had a song, and that was part of their way to connect with students, and it was very successful. The other way that students get engaged in school is through athletics and activities. So we've already had a couple games this year. The top left was Juanita High School's first football game, which was 2 weekends ago. And then on the right side, top right, is Lake Washington and Redmond's girls' soccer game. And so these are just examples of another way that students get engaged in school, to help them feel connected and to cheer on their friends. And it all kind of supports the idea of we're all family, we're all community, and we're all part of it together.
Thanks so much. I'm Whitney Meisner, and I support the secondary schools in the Redmond-Eastlake area. And I completely agree with everything my colleagues have just shared. It's just been a phenomenal start to the school year. I would add a huge thank you to our school PTSAs. That middle sign right there was out in front of Redmond Middle School for many days, courtesy of the PTSA. And there were little gift bags out there on the left for the staff at RMS. And every school I went into had some kind of motivational signage all over the place, like you see on the right. This, again, all happened to be at Redmond Middle School. But the idea that we're focused on positives and connections and belonging, it's palpable in the buildings. And I was in two schools this morning, Redmond Middle School and Inglewood Middle School, and the teachers were thrilled to be there and the students were thrilled to be there. So I don't know for sure what Sunday night was for everyone, but they were there with smiles on their faces this morning, and it was wonderful. I had a chance to visit quite a few co-taught classrooms, which if you haven't had a chance to do, I would really encourage you to join us for that. Co-taught can happen in a multilingual, for students who are learning English or multilingual learners, for students who receive safety net services, or students who have IEPs and 504s. And it's going extremely well. So I saw several versions of that today. And culture, connection, you're hearing a lot of that today. That's what we're really focused on throughout the district and in our schools. The schools I support, it's palpable. Just a little walk through here. The top left there is a staff activity during LEAP at Redmond Middle School, where they were developing their PBIS expectations and coming up with some value statements that they have each group put together a value statement that is up in their staff room. And you can see what they're writing. I didn't take pictures of all of them, but they were all absolutely positive and inspiring. Going across the top, that's Timberline Middle School, their leadership teacher, giving some coaching advice to other teachers on how to do their advisory. And they had a full-on Top Gun theme with flight suits and aviators and the whole deal. So I heard Redmond Middle might be doing something similar soon. Nice banner out in front of Timberline also. In the middle, that's one of our APs from Inglewood, also doing some PBIS work. They have spent a good 2 years really refining their core values, and I saw them up in every classroom I visited today. Along the bottom there, that's more Redmond Middle School. That's the dean and intern at Eastlake High School, also doing some PBIS and behavioral expectations with the staff, and the principal at Redmond Middle School. Great staff doing great things. Truly, truly, I wish I could contain the positive energy that we're experiencing with students and staff in the schools right now. It's been a phenomenal start. That's it, thank you.
Thank you very much. Always exciting to hear about the opening of schools, and that it's such a great beginning. So with that, our next item on the agenda is public comment. The Board of Directors of Lake Washington School welcomes the public to the business meetings of the board and encourages community engagement. We dedicate 30 minutes at these meetings to hear from the public during a public comment period. With the return to in-person meetings, we have updated the process to sign up for public comment, and so please go to our website at lwsd.org/board/public comments to sign up to participate. By noon on the day of the board meeting. Comments will be offered in the order of sign-up, beginning with speakers in person, followed by virtual, and concluding with written comments as time allows. Also, we do ask that you do keep your comment to 3 minutes so that we can ensure everybody has the opportunity. Typically, you will see the green, yellow, red. So it goes yellow at the time you have 1 minute. When it's red, we would ask you just to wrap up if you haven't finished your statements. Also, please feel free to provide us a written copy of what you've said. That's just sometimes easier as well, so we can be able to reference that. We can make sure that gets into the record that way. And so with that, I think I was informed I'm starting with a third person who signed up, correct? So I am starting with MJ Carlson. So welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, school board directors, Dr. Holman, student representatives. Am I echoing weirdly, or is that okay? Sounds weird from here. Okay. I am MJ Carlson. I'm the proud parent of a Finhill Falcon. Not proud enough that I have the shoes. I'm going to have to find those. But I'm also part of a group of community members who've come here tonight to ask you to end the SRO program in Lake Washington and to reinvest its rather substantial budget in programs that actually improve student safety and well-being, such as mental health services. You should have received a report from us this morning with a ton of research and citations, and I am going to just give a quick recap of the nationwide research on SROs, and then my colleagues will speak on more local issues. So, quick recap. Number one, there is no evidence that SRO programs prevent school shootings. Second, if a school shooting does occur, God forbid, a study last year found that the presence of an armed guard, either an SRO or otherwise, doubles the number of fatalities that occur. So in other words, it's statistically safer to be in a school shooting at a school without an SRO than a school with an SRO. Third, there is no strong evidence that SRO programs are effective at decreasing general crime rates on school campuses. In one study, for example, the presence of an SRO decreased the number of fights, but increased the number of gun crimes. So generally sort of a wash. So that's it for the upsides. Now for the downsides of SRO programs. There is research that SRO programs worsen academic outcomes. Schools with SROs have higher truancy rates, more suspensions, and more expulsions than schools without. A recent study found that schools that got a federal grant for school police saw a 2.5% decrease in high school graduation rates and a 4% decrease in college enrollment rates compared to a control group. Even more concerningly, schools with SROs have significantly more arrests and referrals to prosecution than schools without. Kids get funneled into the criminal legal system for the types of minor misdemeanors that back in my day would have been handled by a vice principal as a behavior problem, not by a cop as a crime. And this is absolutely happening locally as well as nationally. Our review of Kirkland SROs found that nearly 3/4 of referrals for prosecution were for kids either possessing or using marijuana. I don't think that's how the district ought to be addressing drug use in our student body. I think that kids who are misbehaving deserve an educative, restorative approach to behavior change, not a criminal record. Before I conclude, I also want to note that all of these risks fall disproportionately on Black and brown kids and disabled and neurodivergent kids. And I think I'm out of time, so I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. So the next person I have signed up is Kristen Dorwin.
Hello, my name is Kristen Dorwin, and I'm a parent of two students who attend Juanita High School. I'm speaking today because my students continually report to me that they feel less safe and more anxious at school due to the presence of armed police officers in the building. As you know, we had a credible threat at JHS last spring. Our community and our kids responded appropriately and used the resources they had to alert responsible adults to the threat. Kids told parents, called 911, or called the tip line number that is printed on the back of their ASB cards. Kirkland PD was part of the response to protect our students from this threat. This does not mean, however, that the SRO was a key part of protecting students. He was, per his report, on vacation when the threat was reported. I am somewhat concerned that he mentioned getting calls to his personal phone about the threat, and I'm still waiting for an answer to my question about whether any students had access to the SRO's personal phone number. Regardless of that fact, the threat was reported in multiple ways by many students, and the SRO's participation in the event was not significant. I do not know if the student making threats was even on the SRO's radar prior to the event. I have been reading SRO reports and have additional concerns about SROs dropping into classrooms and teaching classes. These concerns are shared by other parents who will speak more on this topic. The RCW regarding SROs states that at the beginning of each school year, school districts that have safety and security staff working on school property must present to and discuss with students and distribute to students' families information about the role and responsibilities of safety and security staff. I have not received this information, nor have my students. I am concerned that this district may plan to continue supporting and funding the SRO program, despite a lack of evidence that SROs contribute to student safety. I am even more concerned that the district may do so despite a great deal of data that suggests that having armed police in schools is harmful to students, particularly BIPOC students and students with disabilities. I am not interested in my tax dollars supporting this program in any form, regardless of how watered down it might be. Continuing to have an SRO program indicates to me that the district is more interested in appearance than they are in reality. The data simply does not support the continuance of this program. Thank you, and also thank you to our hardworking classified staff.
Thank you, and the next person I have signed up is Sarah Franklin.
Good evening. My name is Sarah Franklin, and I have two students in the district. And I want to talk to you about some of the concerns community members have about having armed police in our schools. In any way, any version of an SRO program will still raise these concerns. The first major concern is that policing in schools disproportionately targets Black and disabled students more than others. There is plentiful data to support this, as well as public comment from local families. LGBTQ+ students and immigrant students also report feeling targeted by and unsafe with police in schools. Why are we sacrificing the actual safety of some students for the perception of safety for others, especially when it's an illusion of safety, as you heard from MJ earlier? In a letter to the City of Kirkland, the Right to Breathe Committee, which is an East Side Black-led organization, said, It would be heartbreaking to continue to subject some students to the ongoing negative psychological effects and potential bodily harm of armed, uniformed officers in schools in exchange for the rare possibility that an SRO will be in the right place at the right time to intervene in a manner that will actually decrease the impact of a shooter. The fact that this is up for a debate is a painful reminder that the real-world well-being of Black students is too easily bartered in exchange for the perception of comfort and preferences of the white majority. Another major concern is that the arrest rates for schools with SROs is at least 3.5 times higher than the rates for schools without SROs. This contributes to the school-to-prison pipeline. In schools with SROs, typical youth behavior is criminalized, and students are disciplined through policing for things that would priorly have been handled by parents or staff. Additionally, these regular interactions with police have legal consequences for kids. It used to be that if a police officer came to school to question a student, a parent, guardian, or adult had to be there with the student. But now students are having daily interactions with police that are completely without that safety net. And if a student is arrested or referred for charges, that lasts. That's permanent on their record. This is a major loss of rights for our students and families. We want community, not carceral approaches for our family. And I think Director Clark mentioned earlier that teachers want their students to feel loved, connected, and a sense of belonging. And that's what we want for our students. We want them to be able to make mistakes and learn from them and not pay a price that could last a lifetime. That's what school safety looks like. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next person we have signed is Maria Harwell.
I hope you're not going to skip over Kirsten Hansen.
That's fine. I might not have, it got rearranged on a written form on this side, so yes. Is that okay? I don't think that, oh, it is. I just skipped it. I apologize. Kristen Hansen,
Try
you
not
are
to
right.
take it personally. May I ask that that be reset so I do know when my time is up?
Absolutely. I think Teresa will do that for us.
All right. Thank you very
Thank you.
much. My name is Kirsten Hansen, and I'm on the leadership team of Indivisible Kirkland. And it's easy to think that the concerns mentioned by MJ and others aren't an issue here and that our program is better. But that's simply not true. Our group has gathered and reviewed the Kirkland SRO reports for school years 2019 through 2021. And we found that the time spent by Kirkland SROs could generally be broken into several categories: teaching classes, counseling students and families, helping administration with school discipline, and charging children with crimes. On teaching classes, they are teaching both formally and informally in ways that must be examined. The ongoing classes taught by SROs are on Fourth Amendment search and seizure, drug and alcohol prevention, and adolescent development and child psychology. Where are the lesson plans for these classes? In addition to these classes, the reports show SROs teaching and or popping into classes for informal discussion as a primary activity of their day. In his report, SRO John Ness writes, quote, "I assisted twice in watching a class when a teacher had to leave 20 minutes early. Both times, the students were great and asked a multitude of questions about law enforcement." SRO Lebucky reports that he took part in, quote, "integrated social studies class and participated in current event conversations regarding race relations in America," unquote. Race relations is a complex topic. The personal perspective of an armed officer in a classroom is not appropriate. SRO Mark Brown reports, quote, "During the day, I spend the majority of my time going into classrooms and meeting the children and teachers. I have assisted in teaching and participating in science, history, English, intervention, Spanish, and math." As previously mentioned, the very presence of police is traumatic for some students, causing poor educational outcomes. The concern regarding cops in classrooms goes beyond whether they are qualified to be teaching. In equity-related focus groups with Kirkland residents, the city of Kirkland noted recently, quote, most Black focus group participants were generally critical of a police officer being in a school environment as it related specifically to the safety and respect of Black students, as well as students of color broadly. Some focus group participants characterized the presence of an officer in schools as itself a use of force, and that an armed officer generally made students very uncomfortable. Some participants emphasized that an interpersonal relationship can't overcome an institutional problem, describing how one friendly officer won't erase years of evidence of police officers in general being an oppressive force. Thank you.
Thank you. And so now, Maria, thank you.
Hi, my name is Maria Harwell. My pronouns are she, her. I live in Woodinville, and I'm part of Indivisible Kirkland. I will continue the topic of how policing children plays out in the SRO reports from our schools. Kirkland Police Department says one of the purposes of the SRO program is to help students stay emotionally safe at school. We found out that the Kirkland SROs do a lot of informal counseling. SRO Tyler Davidson writes in a report, I'm acting as an informal counselor. What makes an armed police officer the correct person for that job? In many ways, our society criminalizes mental health conditions. We must not continue that with children. Who that child interacts with, the tone of that conversation, and whether that person is carrying a gun matters. Mental health crisis is not a crime. It is clear from the language SROs use in their reports detailing these interactions that police are not the best professionals for dealing with the mental health of students. The language shows clearly that they see suicidality as a crime. SRO Davidson writes, quote, JHS student was investigated for possibly making suicidal threats, unquote. He also writes, quote, assisted Helen Keller Elementary principal and staff with an 8-year-old who suffers from mental health issues have a complete meltdown within the school, unquote. We are alarmed that SROs are working directly with children with special needs, i.e. disabled children. SRO Daniel Lubke reports, quote, I have been heavily involved in communicating with one special education student in particular this month who continually acts and talks in a way that goes beyond the capabilities of the teachers when requested, unquote. SROs are not supposed to assist with school discipline, but the reports show that they do anyway. SRO Davidson reported, quote, multiple trips and extra time was spent at Kamiakin MS and Finn Hill MS due to increased assistance with school discipline issues and cases to be investigated, unquote. He also assisted when a, quote, Kamiakin MS student made inappropriate comments to staff and caused multiple disruptions, unquote. This leads us to another example of the harm SROs pose, which is children being charged with and or referred for crimes. As a previous speaker mentioned, schools must stop the school-to-prison pipeline. SRO Davidson reported, quote, Finn Hill Middle School 12-year-old was found to have marijuana and vape pens on him at school. He has had multiple incidents involving drug violations. Next steps are being taken now, and I filed criminal charges, unquote. A 12-year-old. This child needs support, not criminal charges. SRO Davidson again, quote, JHS student pulling fire alarm at school. Student was identified and will be charged through juvenile court, unquote. A student now has a criminal record. Their life is now forever changed. All of these concerns, disproportionate impact, criminalizing youth behavior, loss of rights, all of that is happening right now in our district. We cannot pretend otherwise. Thank you.
And so the next person is Joey Randall.
Good evening, everyone. Joy Randall, she, her pronouns, and I have 2 children in Lake Washington School District. We've heard this evening that SROs are not effective in keeping schools safe, nor are they necessary for school safety. SROs disproportionately impact some students in negative ways, particularly Black, brown, and disabled students. SROs perform duties for which they are not adequately trained, like teaching, counseling, mentoring, including discipline, even though it's stated they are not responsible for discipline, yet they are relied upon it. A Redmond police officer receives 80 hours of training, 40 of which are school-specific to become an SRO, while teachers, mental health professionals, social workers, nurses must have a bachelor's degree, master's degree, plus licensure through the state of Washington. Who is better qualified to teach, counsel, mentor, and discipline our students? Not an SRO. Our schools should be places where we support, uplift, and honor every single child in all ways they come through those doors. Schools should be where they come to for care, not where they are policed and criminalized for being kids. Mental health professionals can and should be the ones to contact the police as a last resort in emergency situations. Mental health professionals are the appropriate first point of contact for a suicidal student, a student experiencing a potentially abusive or controlling relationship, a middle school student pulling a fire alarm, an elementary school student who refuses to sit down in class, a middle school student caught vaping, students dealing with grief. Why are we expecting and relying on armed police to be the ones to first respond to these students? The costs on the mental health of students, the costs of the long-term impact of being funneled into the criminal punishment system is immense to calculate. We must also look at the full cost of what the district is spending on the SRO program. Generally, the cost of one SRO equates to 2 social work positions or 2 school counselors. We are willing to invest the cost of 1 SRO instead of investing that amount into 2 psychologists or 2 nurse positions. This shows we only care about their compliance and not their mental, social, or emotional health. A true community-based model must include the community, not just an armed police officer regionally covering their assigned schools. A community-based model is where school staff, parents, and students together build relationships and get to the root of the problems in the school and surrounding community. In closing, we ask you to seriously consider all the research, all the data, the stories, and input from students and families negatively impacted by having armed police in our schools. It is irresponsible to continue relying on this false sense of security or perception of safety when it's clear we must invest directly into our students. We can work on a more systemic approach to address safety instead of focusing on modifying individual behavior. We must work together on how we prevent and address safety concerns that protect the health, well-being, and human rights of students, parents, and staff. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person I have signed up is Pamela Kelly.
I am here to represent the Lake Washington School District instructional assistants. We are your frontline workers who perform a variety of duties inside and outside of the schools every day. As you know, our jobs require an education, compassion, strength of character, adaptability, and a high level of interaction with students. This is one of the many reasons that we deserve higher wages, and it's unfortunate that the district doesn't seem to agree. There seems to be the perception that IAs are predominantly spouses of people with good incomes, and they get this job without a need for good pay, a common issue for females, historically speaking. This perception needs to change. There are many of us who aren't in that situation and rely on this income. Even if that wasn't a factor, There's no justifiable reason for a school employee's wages to be below poverty level. We all know that the cost of living in King County has skyrocketed these past years. For a real-world example that is affecting those in similar circumstances, my rent has gone up $700 a month since our last contract began 3 years ago. Meanwhile, my cost of living raises for the past 2 years have been around $40 or 40 cents an hour. I wish it was $40. That's an increase of around $550 in my annual salary. $550 while my rent increase is $8,400. When one of our IAs started 32 years ago, she was earning $8 an hour. We now start at $20, so that means it took 32 years to get a $12 raise. The income to expense gap is getting larger and larger due to how far we are behind in our wages. Later tonight, you will be discussing the new LWESP contract. The website states that a factor in coming to the agreement was based on comparisons with other districts. As a fifth-year employee, if I worked at North Shore this year, I would be making $30 an hour. Speaking of wages, in the 2021 school year, the top 100 earners in the district received $1.3 million in raises. We were told by the district that the school board would only approve about the same amount in raises for the 6 work groups in our union, totaling approximately 430 employees. The largest group, the instructional assistants, along with the extended day IAs and Head Start, Ready Start assistant teachers, have been serving our children on poverty wages. This is an insult to the hard work and dedication of these valuable employees. Taking care of those in the ever-expanding hierarchy while denying a living wage to those on the bottom is inequitable. We ask the district to practice equity with the same standard it aims for with our students. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next person I have signed up is Shahina Nassar.
Good evening. My name is Shahina Nasser. This is my 21st year with Lake Washington School District. We, the classified staff in Lake Washington School District, are at the bottom of the totem pole when it comes down to pay. But we are as important and integral part as for any school as much as the principals and the teachers are. You take the IA, the preschool teachers, the family support specialists, the safety and prevention people, extended day IAs, and technical support out of the picture, and imagine running a single school smoothly. But then we are here fighting for our wages. And it's not just wages, it's fair wages for us. We, the preschool teachers, we plan, we teach, we take care of the students that are in our classroom, along with our special ed teachers and paraeducators. Our teachers, our co-teachers, the special ed teachers, are compensated. They just got compensated for teaching kids who stayed home for COVID. Did we? No, we did not. We were not even looked upon to offer something. We did teach those students as well, but leave extra compensation. We don't even get paid appropriately. We have a teacher who is pregnant right now, and she's unable to get maternity leave because we do not work enough hours, as says the district. We work 6.5 hours in school, in the building that the principals and administration look at. We work a lot more hours on our time, which is not considered by anyone around us. they have no idea how much work we take home. I, as a person, used to take pride in being a Lake Washington School District employee and a Lake Washington School District parent. Where our wages are right now, I don't even start. After 21 years of teaching in this district, having a certificated position or a certificated degree, I choose to stay with preschool because that's where my love is. But I don't get the wages that a preschool teacher should get. If I go to North Shore, after 21 years, the amount I am making, North Shore preschool teachers make much higher the first year they start over there. I would humbly ask you guys to reconsider how you pay this part of your union group. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next person I have is Greta Clymer.
Oh, she couldn't make it.
Oh, okay. Then we won't do that. So our next person we have, she is actually in a virtual, is Alicia Ramirez. So Alicia, you are free to begin.
Hi, everyone, and thank you, members of the Lake Washington School District Board, for letting me speak tonight. My name is Alicia Ramirez, and I'm a Lake Washington School District alumni and parent to a fourth grader here in the district. I've attended tonight to ask that you phase out armed school resource officers in our schools, including in elementary schools. Not only have police in schools proven to be ineffective at stopping or preventing school shootings, but studies show that it has led to the criminalization of youth behavior that disproportionately singles out Black and brown kids. I've seen how that disparity plays out during my time in LWSD as a Black student at Juanita High School. I saw my peers get detained by SORs for behavior that included fighting, being argumentative with staff, drinking, using drugs, including cigarettes, feeling suicidal, or having disruptive behavior because of mental health issues and more. They needed treatment, counselors, and community support, but usually what they ended up getting is court dates and early introduction into the criminal justice system. Some of them never made it out. They're still there as an adult, and a lot of them look just like me. Black and brown families have been asking for years that armed SROs be removed from schools because it is our kids that gets disproportionately harmed the most. When the city of Kirkland held a listening session last year after the passage of the Black Lives Matter resolution, virtually all of the participants described negative interaction with SROs at Juanita and Lake Washington High School as students of color. Their experience in that session, along with mine, were nearly identical, even though we are a good 10 years apart in age. I asked this board to listen to Black and brown families and removed armed police officers from school entirely. They don't need to be there. They do not make us safer. Thank you.
There we go, thank you. We did receive several written comments. Many of those are also in addition to the SROs, the school resource officers. I'm not going to go ahead and read those. Those are available online as well, and all the board members have seen those. But want to just give a heads up that that was ill. So thank you very much for your conversation. Just to know, we will be doing a presentation shortly on the student safety and security within our schools, and the school resource officer program will be discussed at that point in time too. There is no action being taken by the board for that. It will just be informational so that you are aware. Okay, with that, the next item on the agenda is the approval of the September 12th, 2022 consent agenda. I will now entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved by Director LaLiberty and seconded by Director Carlson to approve the consent agenda as presented. Dr. Holman, will you please poll the board?
Director La Liberty?
Yes.
Director Stewart?
Yes.
Director Carlson?
Yes.
Vice President Choi?
Yes.
And President Bleasner?
Yes. And so with that, the motion does carry. And so, Dr. Holman, could you please summarize the donations that we have received through the consent agenda?
Absolutely. And again, it's with great appreciation that we thank our community for their ongoing support. Tonight, we have donations from two sources. First, our PTSA with nearly $60,000 worth of donations, and then other sources providing nearly $13,000 for our schools to offer programs and services that otherwise would be difficult to offer. So just genuinely thank them for their ongoing support of our schools.
Wonderful, thanks. So our first item on the agenda is the non-consent agenda this evening is an update on the school safety and security program. So Dr. Holman, can you please lead that off?
Absolutely. So I'm going to invite Associate Superintendent, change of title, Deputy Superintendent Matt Gillingham and Director of Safety and Security Scott Emery up to the podium to share in the presentation tonight. One of the interests the board has was in an update regarding this overall program, and so tonight Deputy Superintendent Gillingham and Director Emery will provide information about not only the layered security efforts across the district, but also information related to the School Resource Officer Program, some of the program changes and modifications, and future community engagement efforts around this area. So with that, Matt? Yep.
All right, thank you, Dr. Holman and members of the board. So tonight, here to do a deeper dive into one layer of security. So back in June, on the June 6th board meeting, was up here and presented on a layered safety concept or construct that we have within the school district. And the board at that time had asked for an interest in going in and specifically looking at school safety and the topic of school resource officers. So board, as we go through this, we think about our policy connections. OE10 is where the board has directed the superintendent to establish and maintain a safe learning environment that's safe, respectful, free from disruption, and conducive to effective learning. We also have some administrative policies that relate to the topic tonight. Our school-based threat assessment protocol, which I believe we instituted back in 2019. We began fall of 2019 was when we began to institute that protocol. We have policies regarding emergencies, policies regarding the relationship with law enforcement, a policy regarding school safety and security services program, which was recently adopted, and then notification regarding threats of violence of harm. I want to talk briefly about layered security, but I'm not going to replicate the presentation that we gave in June. So instead of going deeply into each layer today, I'll just kind of provide a bit of a synopsis of the conversation we had in June, and then we'll introduce Scott Emery, Director of Risk and Safety Services, to do a deeper dive into school safety. So the concept of layered safety and security is one where we really look at from a multi kind of layered or multifaceted approach. And we think about the protective factors as well as the risk factors that are present within our schools and for our students. We've heard a lot of conversations today around thinking around like behavioral health needs. And so you've also heard at the beginning of the board meeting tonight, that sense of belonging and that joy of kind of being that sense of connection. And those are elements as well of a layered safety protocol or approach. So we also think about what are physical layers, such as some of the investments that the community has made in door locks, lockdown shades, thinking about protocols around our internal safety, such as badging, and thinking about kind of our external safety as well. So all of these layers, ideally, as we continue to build on these layers, are intended to help create a safe and supportive environment for our students and our staff. And so when we think about them, we broke them down into thinking about student well-being, classroom safety, school safety, internal safety, external safety, cyber safety, as well as our safety management structure. So tonight we're going to focus in on school safety and specifically look at school resource officers. Director Emery is going to talk about some of the transformation that's occurred over the past couple of years, and specifically this year we have made a change in the school resource officer program. We've reduced the program fiscally by about $460,000 and reinvested that into behavioral health supports, as well as the Student Services Department and Equity and Family Engagement Department. And some of that, those changes have come out from experiences that we've had and conversations that we've had with the City of Kirkland as they've been engaged with their school resource officer process and program, as well as we've reflected on back to that sense of the layered, the layers of what is it that we, that supports that we feel that we might need. And what are other or better uses of those resources in the context of that kind of holistic structure. So I'm going to turn it over to Director Emery, who will take us through kind of our the history so far of the School Resource Officer Program, where we are currently, and talk about the plans that we have for ongoing reviews with our community as we think about working with the 4 municipalities that we partner with on school safety. Director Emery?
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you, Board of Directors, for this time to talk about this. I appreciate it. Sorry, I haven't talked in about an hour, and so my throat's a little clogged. As you can see, when we talk about the SRO program, we've had we believe we will always have interaction with police. As we heard tonight, there's always indications of police interactions within the school community. And so what the approach we've taken on this, the changes we've made, is how do we influence those interactions? And how can we better impact the relationship we have with those officers to influence the interactions in a positive way? So as we began to reimagine how that could work, it also happened to be at the time when the state passed House Bill 1214, which provided an outline of expectations of an SRO program. And so it was interesting that at the very same time we were doing those thinkings, the legislature passed some language that helped provide support for that. So as we think about those layers of safety, and the layer of school safety in particular, and all of the different programs that fall within that layer, there isn't one program within there that is the way to provide school safety. We want to be sure that we've addressed all of those different layers, but all of those different programs. And so when you think about the interactions that we have with police and the ability to influence those interactions, we want to identify the expertise that they have and the things that they bring within their training and within the scope of their role. And then prioritize that resource to do just that. And so by making some of these changes that I'll talk about, I think we've moved that direction a bit. So in the past, our SROs were assigned to an individual school. It was based on the relationship and the partnership we had with each police department and their ability to staff or their ability to partner in any given year. And so over time, that changes based on conditions or events or things that are happening within the community. But for the most part, historically, it's been an officer in a school. And that's how our program has existed. The transition began a couple of years ago when we began talking about these interactions and how to influence them a little bit more. And when the policies were required under House Bill 1214 and the changes happened, we moved to adopt those policies so that we were in compliance. And then last year we ran a program pilot with Redmond PD. It really benefited, and I'll go in a little bit more detail about that, but it really benefited our partnership in that they didn't have staffing ability to staff all the positions that historically we've said needed to be in schools. So through our conversations, we were able to find some ways to provide that expertise without having to have an officer in the school itself. And so the regional model was kind of born out of that conversation, where officers serve a number of schools instead of being at just one school where they reside. It defines specific responsibilities, tasks that they have. We'll go into that a little bit later. And that's all been updated through our contract and MOUs with them. So it's codified for us in our actual agreement with them. The future of the program, however, is a community activity. And this describes or demonstrates to you how we intend to move forward. Where we are now is where we are. What we need to do is have some community engagement and conversation about that. And so by bringing our partners together, but that includes the stakeholders, not just our partners, not just the district and our police partners. That means bringing our community together, bringing our student voice into the conversation, and really listening and hearing what that looks like. We want to be sure that it's not something I just sat and dreamed up, or someone sat and dreamed up, but that it is a result of a community conversation. We did participate in the past in some task force work with the city of Kirkland and for their SRO program within the city. We want to keep that moving. We want to replicate some of those programs where we do this on an annual basis. It's not a one-time transactional conversation, that it's something that we engage in not just on that moment or schedule a meeting, but it's something that we engage in on an ongoing basis and at least annually bring everyone together to have those conversations. So I'm excited to work on this. We spent the spring preparing for what that might look like, how to do that meaningfully, how to do it with integrity. And so beginning this fall, we're putting our steering committee together to put that community engagement program. It involves a number of folks at the planning stage, including our equity department, safety and security, student services, all of those folks, so that we can do a meaningful community engagement process. We've also partnered with the Puget Sound ESD and brought in some facilitation service through their equity team, as well as their leaders of the ESD Safety and Security Center down there. So it's something that we are planning in a very broad sense to include as many partners, as many stakeholders, as many folks as we can in ways that they can join us. I think often we put together programs and expect people to meet us where we are, and we want to be sure that as we put this together, we find ways to meet people where they are and hear their voice in ways that are actually meaningful. So I'm excited to move that forward and see what the fall brings us, and in hopes that that program is in place before the end of the calendar year so that we can begin that process moving forward. Yes?
A question. Do you want me to wait?
Have you finished your presentation, or is there a little more to go?
There's a few more slides to go, yeah.
It's up to you.
You know, since we have stopped at this point, go ahead and ask your question. It will just be easier.
I was actually hoping that you could just clarify something. You mentioned the expertise that the SRO brings, and I'm curious if you could elaborate on what you mean by expertise that the police are providing, specifically that they couldn't provide as just our community police officer, but specifically as an SRO.
Yeah, actually, I'll speak to that pretty detailed in one of the slides. So I'll be happy to get to that place
Thank you.
in just one more slide. Yeah, so the SRO program, the contract revision process was taking into consideration the conversations and all of those House Bill 1214 requirements and all the things that we've been talking about, and putting it into a written mutual agreement with our police partners. And the other important part of this was that we serve 4 different agencies, or 4 different agencies serve us as far as our police partners. So we have King County Sheriff, City of Sammamish Police, City of Redmond, and City of Kirkland. And making sure that our agreements with each of them were the same, and that in the past, some of those differences led to some challenges in helping manage the SRO program that lived within Lake Washington. And with this effort, we've standardized all of that language so that it's the same understanding between agencies. So the physical change is that that SROs, or police officers, are going to serve in their regional areas, not at a particular school. So they don't have a particular office in a particular place, that they will serve schools, and I'll get to the tasks that they're going to be doing as they serve those schools. It also provides some additional support for staffing on the agency side, because they, as you know, police officers and police departments are suffering under some staffing shortages. This provides them the ability to still provide us that service, but not have to provide as many folks. There are training recommendations, and I'm going to talk about what those training things look like and the training subjects that are required, and responsibilities, and that's where we'll get into your question about what are they going to do. So as I talked about in the regional support, this is all schools within a region, and for districts, or departments that have a lot of schools, they've divided those schools into very specific regions for their officers. So schools would see service provided by a common officer that's coming into their school, not a random officer off of patrol. It provides specific tasks and expectations of those SROs, and it contributes to the success on their staffing end, and we receive a consistent level of service rather than suffering from the staffing shortages. The training that's required is lengthy, and it is articulated through House Bill 1214, what the requirements are. I'm not going to read them all, but they are all here on the slide. We, as part of our district's investment into the program as well, Sheila Kemble is our school safety and crisis manager, and she oversees the program directly and works to ensure all of these officers have all of this training in our partnership agreement. She does the day-to-day operational work with them. She meets with them. She meets with each officer, and as a group, they meet periodically, monthly, to talk among all the different agencies and make sure that our programs are being applied consistently. This also requires on-the-job training, and so an SRO is required to, I believe it's 2 days of mentorship with an experienced SRO. And so after they've completed this, they also all, through their agency, attend the National SRO training, which I don't know how many days it is. I think it's a week training course. So there's some specialized training that each person receives before they move into an SRO program. These are the responsibilities that you mentioned. It's broken into 4 areas of responsibility with some tasks that are outlined in those areas. And so under law enforcement, we want to be sure that they're a police officer and they are very clear what law enforcement role that they play. So again, these are specifically outlined in our understanding, and they are taken directly from House Bill 1214 work that was provided to us through the legislative decision. And then education, speaking to class, and I recognized that can happen at a school, but our agreements are as requested. And we want to be sure that we are looking at that and making sure that we know what they're doing and when they're in a classroom, and that it's something that the school administrator has approved. We also want to be sure that they are engaged in any community groups on relevant topics. We've had them partnered with them on a variety of different subjects over the years for parent education and things to help bring that conversation or training to parents as well. Fostering a positive school climate. I mean, this is language directly out of the House Bill 1214. Want to be sure that they are part of that positive climate. that they do have positive relationship with students, and that there's the do's and the don'ts, that they can build a positive relationship, but they don't participate in school discipline. And that's not been articulated clearly before in our agreement with them, and it's very clearly outlined now. That can look a lot of different ways depending on the school, and we want the schools to have the freedom to do what they need with the officer in more of a community policing environment than we live in the school and we're going to be here every day. And then crime prevention, this is something very specific that they have an expertise in that, that we want to experience. We want them to actually not patrol our campus, that's probably a poor word in the slide there, but we want them to walk the campus with us to review crime prevention measures that could be put into place. Things like crime prevention through environmental design is something they're all trained in, and to provide us with security measures, recommendations, things that we wouldn't necessarily see from their point of view, and we want to have their point of view as we develop increased security measures. Not decision-making, but recommendations. The other thing that they do for us is they participate in our threat assessment process for student threat assessment, and that's an important part led by the school administration. When a threat assessment is called, it's a multidisciplinary process and protocol, and having those trained officers with us is important, and it's part of the protocol through the ESD and through the state, but having them trained so that we know that it's an officer trained as an SRO is a much better influence over that interaction that we're going to have with them. So that's another program that they will participate when that arrives.
Scott, before you move on, I just want to make sure that I understand that first bullet under crime prevention. It says foot patrol on campus.
That was the one where I poorly used that word.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding what you're meaning by that. What I believe what you mean is, walking the campus with administration.
Correct. It is a partner walk for a security review of the campus in a one-time event.
Okay, thank you.
Not a patrol. So that's a poor word that in my head it made sense when I wrote it, but it doesn't make sense.
Thank you.
Yeah. Data collection is part of House Bill 1214. It was required to collect and to report data, and that eventually makes its way to OSPI. This year, this is kind of an iterative building process, even to our ESD and to OSPI. This year, our program, the only requirement was to report how many SROs were in the district, their locations, sort of stats about the program. There was no data collection as far as interaction with students because districts were struggling with how to make that effective. And OSPI, frankly, and the ESD were trying to figure out what it is and how that report's going to look. Interestingly, I got an email today from the person at OSPI putting that together, wanting to talk about what this year is going to look like. So that was good. The agency data, that meaning from the police department, they're collecting specific data on their interactions with students. They're working and creating dashboards. Kirkland sort of led the way on that. Redmond is not far behind, and Sammamish is a little farther. Then moving that into our district data, making sure that our data aligns. And again, that coordination of 4 agencies is challenging, and making sure that it's information and data collected that we can display accurately and comparatively. And then eventually that'll make its way to the OSPI report. But I don't know what that looks like yet. And then the final slide is just an example of the Kirkland dashboard as they've created it now. Did you have something? I felt you moved behind me. I thought maybe you were going to step up. Yeah, okay. So this is an example of the Kirkland dashboard, and this is their public dashboard for their SRO program. And so there's a lot of information contained in there that isn't necessarily something so far that we've had any influence over, but this is that partnership I'm talking about where we want to be sure dashboards that we can actually be part of the building of that, so that it's something that we understand. I couldn't tell you specifically some of the data that's contained in there. And so having seen this, it's something that we need to strengthen that partnership.
I think to note that this reflects interactions with youth at any time.
Yeah, this is not on campus. This is any interaction with youth in the city of Kirkland. And so the things that are reflected here aren't necessarily things that happened on campus in a Lake Washington school. That's the part I'm not sure of.
But the SRO was.
The SRO was
the
involved
individual.
in whatever that action was. Mhm. All right, that's the update.
Go ahead.
So Scott, one of the things that I know we've been discussing at length for a number of years is how we maintain programmatic control. And, you know, our community came tonight and shared information that my guess is you're listening and concerned as well. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we've been working to be explicit about is what is the role and what is not the role. The role of an SRO is not a counselor. The role of an SRO is not to be involved in any form or function of school discipline, because we know outcomes, and that's not their role. They're not trained in school discipline. And so just hearing your presentation tonight, I appreciate the work that's been done, and also would just like to hear your initial thoughts on next steps related to just kind of programmatic control. And after hearing some of the comments tonight, what would be some next steps that the individuals that shared tonight could expect of you, as this is directly in your oversight? Mm-hmm. And so just what do you do with that feedback that you heard tonight?
Yeah, I think that moving forward, the community engagement process is going to be the most important process we do around an SRO program. It is not, maybe I should say, it'll be designed to be listening. It will be designed to truly engage to the best of our ability, which is why we've partnered with facilitators, which is why we've partnered in a way to be as deep and meaningful as possible. I think it needs to include student voice as strongly as we possibly can. And so it's a community engagement program under the law. It's a community engagement program to review the contract that we have with our police agency. And so we're going to do exactly that. And that includes every part of it. And so that's why we want to take a breath and figure out how to do that well. I think we've done lots and lots of opportunities to engage with our students and community, and we get together, we talk, and we leave, and we don't have a meaningful end. And so my objective is to have an open discussion that is, of course, civil and all of those things, but that it comes to a place of listening. And I don't know that we've, on this particular subject, had that opportunity before. And so I want to be sure that that's what we do.
Yeah. Could you also, just for the board, for people in attendance, talk about engagement with law enforcement? My guess is it's not apparent how often we're engaging with our law enforcement agencies. And could you just reflect on how often we're engaged with our law enforcement partners?
Directly in our schools?
Well, directly in our schools. I know on the weekends,
It would be very difficult to actually articulate that, because it's everything from a social media post where we might be all weekend trying to figure that out, to a welfare check based on a report of an individual. It can be an actual threat made. It can be a student is in distress, not related to school, but is in distress, and that officer knows that student and will call to find support, making sure the school's aware of things, that on Monday, when everyone comes back to school, there's counselors ready, somebody's ready to help the circles of friends around that student and the teachers and the staff. It's nearly every day, nearly every weekend, sort of unrelenting, constant communication to provide support to students in ways that, until I was in this place, I wouldn't have ever dreamed.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. With that, I'm going to open it up to any questions, and we're going to just sort of work down the line. So we'll start with Eric first.
Excellent. I picked my spot well. You led off your presentation by talking about the steering committee that you said you had spent the spring thinking about and was forming. So I have a few questions around that. So first, I guess, did I hear correct that the steering committee a component of the steering committee will have student voice in it? Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. And then it also stands to reason that it will also have some parent and other community voice in it.
Yes.
It won't just, in other words, it won't just be an internal group of Lake Washington staff.
Absolutely, yes.
That's great. What steering committee, to me, that term suggests that in some ways it will be steering or providing recommendations on policy or what the program looks like. Is that what what is this committee being tasked with? What should we expect to hear from this committee? What's the output?
So the committee itself, the task I've put to that committee is designing how we're going to do a community engagement process.
Okay.
So they're the team that we worked with through the spring, hearing from school principals, hearing from SROs, hearing from different parts of our partnerships to say, let's do this well. Let's do a community engagement process well. That's where we were facilitated through the ESD, through our equity team, to make sure that we were hearing and thinking about things from an equity racial standpoint. And then this committee's job is to put together a process, not to run it or make a recommendation.
Okay,
Yes.
I'm glad I asked that because I think I misunderstood. So the steering committee is to steer the community engagement process,
Yes.
not the program itself.
Correct.
Okay, so then we, the district, receives whatever input we receive from the community engagement process. What do we do with that? Do we have a sense of what we do with that at this point? And I recognize that's quite a speculative question I'm asking you because
Yeah.
you don't know what that engagement is. Okay.
Require a crystal ball maybe to figure
Sure.
that out, but
Okay, but let's say the community engagement is, similar to what we heard tonight. We don't like this. This isn't working, et cetera, et cetera. Let's just say the community engagement spits out exactly what we heard tonight.
Yep.
We as a district take that in, right? And that goes to Superintendent Holman, and then we think about the future of the program and how to shift it or change it or not have it. Is that fair to say?
I believe the community engagement process will be about responsive to what are the conditions that are outlined in the contract. And so the contract really does outline the program.
Right.
Scott just kind of outlined what it looks like and pieces like that. If Scott came back and said there's X recommendation, regardless of what that recommendation is, I would then ask for really information about what does then our engagement look like with law enforcement, because that's a piece that is constant. Like the option to disengage with law enforcement that will never be part of the equation. And so my question would be back, then what does that engagement look like? So it would be seeking to understand what that recommendation, how thorough it was.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
One comment, then I'll yield the floor. I just want thank you for the presentation. I think I went in tonight with thinking of a single model of SR of our how we engage with our law enforcement, and that being the model that has been in place historically. And I think I think that's probably too reductive of a way that I was thinking about it. But you're right, the way to think about it is we will be engaging, unfortunately, we will have to engage with law enforcement, and what is that model? Okay, so anyway, I just want to say thank you for that. That really helped to clarify things in my mind.
Okay, Director Stewart.
When will the program of meeting with parents and meeting with students from the new RCW take effect? There was a comment earlier this evening that there is now supposed to be some kind of meetings with the students, with the parents, so forth, to have an engagement between the SROs and the community. When will those be engaged?
So I took that note down as well, and so I need to look into that, and I'll follow up.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
Just curious. We heard tonight about arrests from some community members. Do we know how many arrests have been made by SROs on the various campuses?
To my knowledge, the arrests were not made on our campuses.
Okay.
Scott, will you quantify that statement?
The
Is that
two
within
that
the last
were
year?
the two that were in the Kirkland report on their dashboard did not take place on our campuses.
And so last year, we didn't have any arrests on our campuses. Do you recall, sorry, this is, a few years ago, but the last full school year we had, 2018-19, if you don't
I don't recall, but I know that it would stick out in my head. So I don't recall any arrests made on campus in our schools.
Sorry, Director Stewart, I just wanted to
No
make
problem.
sure I
It helps.
clarified the.
That helps. Any clarification that God knows I always need to be clarified. We've been told about research, and I'm still looking at, to be quite frank, I've been looking through the studies that you all sent, and quoting another source, then going to another sub-source, another sub-source, and then I get to the study, and then there's a roadblock that says pay $49 and you can have the answer. I'd really, maybe it's my old journalism training, but I'd really like to have the actual reports. That'd be great, because I'm running into op-eds. And I would need to, I want to be able to make sure that we're making a very informed decision. This is a problem throughout an issue that's a problem with our students throughout the district, from what it sounds like, but I also need to know that I'm getting information that I can look at and say, okay, I can make an informed decision from it. Do we have any research on that would cause us to think that our SRO programs are being effective in preventing issues or safety concerns?
One of the challenges of that, yes, is it's hard to measure what didn't happen. So that's a difficult set of data to collect, but we, through the process of reimagining, so to speak, we're working on ways that that collected data can reflect any of those types of situations. I don't have any now because we haven't had a program in place for a while, but as we move forward, that's definitely something, if we can find ways to collect that, for sure.
Okay, that'd be great if we could have that too, because all these sort of things.
Yep.
I'll be quite frank, I'm torn. I'm torn between the sentiments being expressed by the parents and some students I've talked to. I'm also torn by other parents I've talked to. They're scared to death of the security for their kids. But that's where I'm at.
Thank you.
So Director Carlson?
Earlier, Director Choi allowed me to ask 3 questions in a row before she asked her question. So I'm going to ask her to go before I go.
So Director Choi.
Thank you. First, I would like to say thank you for the presentation tonight. I appreciate that the district is trying to have a consistent model across our entire school district. I know it's very hard navigating 4 different municipalities that we have to deal with to try to get a system in place that makes sense for the entire district, and I appreciate the effort that has been going into this. I do have a question. So it looks like we're moving in the right direction and trying to clearly define the responsibilities of an SRO officer. I'm curious, what happens when there are violations of those responsibilities?
Mhm.
Has that process been outlined and discussed in these contracts? And then is there a clear mechanism for reporting those violations, a safe mechanism for students or community members to say when they feel like it hasn't worked?
That's definitely part of our work ahead of us, is to make that more clear. There is a grievance process built into the agreement on how to communicate that. Your question specifically about, is there a safe way? I really want to address that as we move forward, because right now it is a grievance process. Like, tell us when that doesn't feel right or what went wrong. I can say we've had that in the past, and we have moved those particular officers out of our district when those things have happened. But yes, we have a grievance process in the contract itself, and then the agencies have their own processes. It's one of the challenges, is making sure those things happen in simultaneously and to our benefit. I want to be totally frank about that. Like, that is something that is very specifically laid out.
Scott, can you, I don't have House Bill 1214 pulled up or in front of me. Wasn't one of the components a reporting system?
Yes.
For community?
Yes.
To be in place? Okay.
Yeah, a grievance process, or a complaint process, I think is the word they used.
Gotcha. Thank you.
But it didn't outline like how a person does that report. That's up to us to do.
Okay, thank you.
And then I just had one other quick question, and that was the community dashboard is great, but it seems to be dependent on the municipality to provide that information. If we are having instances of interaction between a school resource officer and a student on our campuses, isn't that data that we could collect ourselves?
Absolutely.
And maintain?
Yeah, absolutely. And that this year, that is exactly what we're doing. And so when I had that slide that showed the agency data and the district data, that's what I want to make sure we have our own set of data to compare to. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So actually, Director Carlson, I was going to keep going that way and come back to you, if that's okay.
Go ahead. I'm sure they
Okay.
won't ask my questions, but I do get to ask my questions back.
Okay.
Okay.
So Evan?
All right. So firstly, I just want to make sure I'm on the right page with all of this. So what I am understanding from the presentation is that we are moving away from the current model we have, where SROs are more consistently in the building, walking around, interacting with students, to closer to to more of a contracting model where SROs are brought into the school on a case-by-case basis to perform specific needs. Would that be a correct understanding?
The difference between the previous model and this model, I wouldn't say they're called on to do a specific thing, because there's something in that list, those 4 areas of their responsibilities, that would provide that they would be engaged every day in a particular school. But they will not be living in Juanita High School. That won't be where they go and we dispatch out of there. It's more that they have a number of schools within their area of responsibility, and that means we're scheduling campus walks with you. We are scheduling specific things that school might need around. There are schools that want law enforcement to do something within their school, so we bring them in to do those types of things. So it's not quite as I understood the way you said that, but it is very much, they don't live at a school, they're not in a school, walking around the hallways, popping into classes. That's something I don't want to have happen.
All right, thank you. So with that out of the way, you opened your presentation with the statement that you believe that interaction with police is inevitable. I was wondering if I could just get some further clarification on that statement.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about that further. We interact with law enforcement nearly every day under a variety of circumstances. Whether that be a threat, a social media post that seems like a threat, or welfare, threat assessment, law enforcement issues that they're dealing with outside of school that might impact the school, and building that relationship where we have an influence over when and how those interactions happen on our campuses is really important. And so by disengaging them from a particular school, putting them into a regional area where we can have more influence over what those interactions look like, is the intent of the changes.
So just to rephrase that for my own understanding, apologies. The interaction with police is more from a district level, you believe is inevitable?
Correct.
All right, perfect. So we list on here the training, particularly when we look here and we see bias-free policing and cultural competencies, educational rights of students with disabilities, disparities in use of force, in responding to youth mental illness issues, as well as just about every other one of these. These are all incredibly complex issues. So in what way are we ensuring, or are we trying to ensure that these trainings are being met by our SROs on a consistent basis?
So when the legislature passed the bill, the House Bill 1214, they instructed each of the regional educational service districts to provide a structure of training for all security members for districts. And so we are utilizing the tools that have been provided by our Puget Sound ESD to put our SROs through that training. So it's the state-approved level training. Whether that gets it exactly what we want is another story, but we've only done it once because this is a new bill and this is a new list of trainings. So as we have gone through it ourselves, we've evaluated what we'd like to improve upon or do differently for our SROs in our district and not just rely on that state-level training.
So I understand the training is integral, but once those SROs are within the schools, I know we talked about a grievance process, but beyond advocating for students to be able to self-report their own grievances with our SROs, do we have a method in which we are tracking and making sure that those trainings are being upheld?
Yeah, that's when I mentioned Sheila Kemble, she's our manager that oversees the program. She's tracking those directly with the supervisors of the SROs within the agency. So there's a sergeant or a position that oversees the SROs that are working in our schools that's on the police side. And Sheila cooperates and works back and forth with them to articulate the training that they've had and create confidence that they've had that.
Scott, can you, if I remember correctly, the House bill actually talks about ongoing training.
Yes.
So I don't believe this is a one-time training. I believe it's annual, at a minimum, annual training.
Yes.
For school resource officers.
And that's one of the things that we want to be super clear on for our own district is whether it's annual or not, or whatever the intervals that the state said we have to follow. We believe this is an annual thing, that we want to be sure that our SROs have that level of training, because we all know we can go to training and then if you don't think about that for a while, you need a reminder. So that's that repetitive nature of the training that we want to be sure is here in Lake Washington.
So this is a comment, but as the student representative, particularly for Juanita High School, where I go, where we have an incredibly high minority population and diverse population, I have to express my concerns with any sort of process that relies on training and oversight, because the vast majority of data will tell you that generally across the entire country, I'm not trying to negatively talk about our local police because I do not have that information, but on a national scale, the ability of police departments to be able to supervise themselves and hold themselves accountable has been shown to be very low. And so just as a student representative, I want to express my concern with that model. And finally, as much as I understand the concept of communication, I do think we need to point out that we had about 10 people come in today, all arguing specifically one side, and as a student, I've only ever had experiences with people arguing that same side. So overall, as much as I agree with the idea that we need to have communication and we need to create these committees, I don't want us to hide behind that idea of communication if the evidence towards one side is overwhelming. I don't believe we have the data to prove that yet, but to be honest, I do believe that is the result that we will come to. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Shivani.
Kind of adding on to what Evan said, in the training you included that the SROs would help trauma-informed approaches to help with youth and also respond to mental health challenges. In what way would this fit with the current school ecosystems? Because right now there are counselors and mental health professionals in the school settings that are there to help students. So how would the SRO's responsibility differ from currently the current responsibilities of current professionals?
It's a great question, and I don't believe that their role will be to replace or do those things in a school. The list of training that we have is the requirement from the state, so it helps provide a foundation for those officers to know and understand how that works within a school, not to be the responding party to a mental health concern or anything, or counseling or anything like that. I don't know that the people who put together that list of training necessarily thought about Lake Washington, but that is not going to be our approach. It's still a requirement of their training.
So if I can speak briefly about trauma. One of the things with trauma-informed practices is a part of a training. It's a type of training that's, I've had an opportunity to go through trauma-informed investigation. And it is training, so when you interact with somebody, of being able to recognize whether that person is in a state of trauma, because the way that they might present or the way that they may respond has historically led to individuals who've been victims of crime being dismissed because they didn't fit necessarily a typical kind of what we'd expect of a typical response from somebody that's not having a traumatic response. So that when you see that, that's kind of that generalized type of training that that law enforcement's being asked to, and in this case being compelled to participate in. But I concur with Scott. We don't have an interest where we wanted to have our behavioral health professionals be the one to engage with students. And our counselors when students are experiencing mental health distress.
Thank you.
Okay, Director Carlson, I think you had some questions.
Remarkably, I actually have one or two left. But many of these were already on my list, so I'm pleased that someone else asked them. So early on, Matt, you had mentioned that budgetarily this year, we had shifted $460,000 out of the SRO program and into other mental health supports. And I'm really curious about that in terms of where did the money come from and where did it go? Is the SRO program, is all dollars under that just SRO FTE? In which case we've reduced our FTE across the district by a significant amount for the SROs and moved those FTEs into other space. Is that an accurate interpretation?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of factors. So our SRO, our police agencies, haven't been able to fulfill some of their contractual requirements. And so our police agencies have come to us as well with an interest or an admission that they haven't been able to staff in that kind of one-to-one model that aligned with our interest in beginning to shift the model and move to a model that kind of more narrowly tailors the service that's being provided.
and recognized that we had some schools that weren't, we now have an interest, and we have all of our secondary schools, including our choice schools, that have a full-time behavioral health specialist, and so we wanted to kind of complete our movement to that model. And then we had staff, internal staff in the Student Services and Family and Equity Engagement Department that we'd been funding through grants that had expired. And so we wanted to make sure that we were preserving the great work that those teams were doing. So when we looked at this, it seemed like it was a natural shift for us to be able to make some changes within the program that honestly we had an interest in. There was kind of a mutual interest in trying to do something different as we start to kind of go through a process to really intentionally evaluate the program and to make sure that we're keeping those other layers of supports that we've been working to build into the school system.
Great, thank you. And so this is something that I've been very interested in, the various responsibilities. The outline of the responsibilities here is much better than what I've been trying to tease out of our previous efforts. And given the concerns that have been expressed this evening by people in the audience around counseling being de facto something that's happening, both with it not being an explicit thing, but also with shifting to a model where it's not building based. If they're not always available, they're not counseling becomes a very difficult thing to do. Is that an intentional piece of this?
Yeah. So I think back when I first entered the district as a building administrator, and we didn't have a lot of those other layers of support that had been put into place. And so oftentimes you turn to the one resource in the community that was there, and that I remember sitting down with students and who were expressing suicidality and concern, and we didn't have plans or tools or behavioral health specialists, and the SRO seemed to be the only way to kind of get kids care. And so we have been really intentional about trying to build different layers of building out like a suicide prevention plan, ensuring that we have the ability to do risk assessments by professionals who are trained in that, in that capacity. So I think a way to look at what we're trying to do is recognizing, as Dr. Holman talked about, that, and Director Emery have talked about, like there's an interaction that we will have with police, and unfortunately that's times where there's threats made, children are victims of crime, and so working to kind of tailor how do we work with police agencies in those moments, and recognizing that there's other incidences where students are maybe in crisis and there's a different type of response or a different type of support that is needed. And trying to kind of pull together that in this layered sort of concept. So we're continuing to work on trying to define those layers. So we have the kind of, hopefully the most appropriate people, teams, or individuals sort of responding to the right type of need. And so that's kind of been the evolution over time. And I expect that we will continue to change and evolve, and recognizing that, for school safety, that's, there's a lot of things that are still to be discussed and kind of work through to make sure that we are serving our students as best as possible and not creating conditions where they experience harm.
Okay, and I've got one more, and it's a quickie. And this one's for John. A school counselor, all in, is about $100,000 a year.
A little more, about 110 to 120.
An SRO cannot possibly making $220,000. We had an assertion that an SRO makes twice as much as a counselor.
There may be a...
I will save you from the assassin bug.
All right.
Anyway, I'm sorry. Timing. But our SROs in our budget, how much do they cost us per FTE?
Well, it's different for each municipality. City of Kirkland, City of Redmond, they supplement some of that cost. The King County Sheriff's Department, we actually cover the full cost of an SRO for that, and I believe that's around $140,000.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that that number was
Okay.
a reality check. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, I have a few questions. So one of the pieces that you have in here is elementary schools are being covered. What was the decision or reason in which to have elementary schools as a piece?
When defining the layers and the expertise that they provide us, meaning the law enforcement officer, having the partnership around campus safety and those poorly worded patrols, but the walks around our buildings and providing us some insight into crime prevention, that's actually one of the big things we want to bring to our elementary schools that we haven't had in the past, because that's an expertise we don't have, their eyes on our buildings and providing that input.
And that would be an expertise that would not be required to have kids in the building at the time in which
Correct.
they're doing so, correct?
Yeah,
Okay,
correct.
so that's just, so really that's the component of how that's added.
Correct.
Okay, so I was curious on that. The other piece was, as you go through the community engagement piece, and you spoke about the steering committee, the question, it sounds like what I'm hearing is they will be looking at the contract and how effectively that is being implemented and that we're following those things and potential changes to the contract. Is that fair?
That's the structure of the conversation, yes.
Okay, so the piece that I'm not hearing is, where is the conversation around what should our engagement with law enforcement look like? And is a contractual agreement with an SRO the right agreement to have, or is it a different one? So sort of around, so I don't know where that falls. I guess that was the piece I was concerned about, is I feel there's a scripted piece here that says SRO program. Where is the piece where potentially the SRO program doesn't exist because it's something else in how we engage with law enforcement?
You know, I think that's a great question. And I would like to give you a better answer than something on the fly tonight. And so I think it would be beneficial for Scott, Matt, and myself to talk about what the community engagement process is and is not, and just bring that back to the board so we give you a more thorough response than I think what we could provide this evening.
That would be great. I mean, it made me think of Evan's comments in regards to what's the final outcome. I think that objective of that community engagement is the piece to really dive into. The other component that I was curious is, what specifics of the SRO is being provided that couldn't be provided by a commissioned officer without a contract from the district?
The expertise that an officer has comes from their training. So there is expertise that a commissioned officer that is not a trained SRO could bring us. That would require a different type of agreement with our cities. So I think that speaks back to the conversation about, is there a completely different model that we could evaluate? I think that would require that kind of conversation. But yes, to a certain degree, all of those officers, any officer can provide their crime prevention, their safety security lens to us, but it has to be under some sort of agreement to pay for that service, because it's not free to us.
Right, no, and
Yeah.
I appreciate
Yeah.
the additional training
Yeah.
and the focus on that component and the adolescent piece.
Yes.
And all of those. Those are vital and I think are very useful in many situations in regards to this. But I do think how we approach that from, if safety and security is what we're looking for within our schools, or is it how do we interact with law enforcement? I do believe those are two different questions. And I think we need to separate those to think about. They overlap, but they differently approach, I think, of where's the interest in trying to go through this. So I appreciate the changes and the moving to regional. The reason I brought up elementary is because there was a time when we had elementary SRO in our programs, and we do not anymore. And that was a discussion point that we'd had prior. And so knowing it's from a security in that piece, it makes sense. We do a lot of that work in what we've done. Just wanted to make sure that was there. The other question I would just ask is if we could just get the talking point, not the talking points, but the actual breakdown of House Bill 1214 of what the specific words on the data. I do appreciate the data dashboard that Kirkland does put out, but you're right, understanding the background of that data is useful. And getting consistency across all of those. I do think being able to have the local data will be valuable, and being able to hold those conversations as, is this doing what we want it to do? You know, adapt, adopt, amend,
Absolutely.
right? So I think those are the things I'd be looking at. And so my question would be, and the question I would toss to all of you is, what data or what information would potentially lead to the point of saying, you know what, having a school resource officer really isn't the right approach? I don't think there's an answer for that tonight. I'm just putting that out as make sure that we're collecting that information in the way that we can truly answer these questions.
Okay.
All right, I think there was another question. Director Liberty and then Director Stewart.
Are all of our contracts with the municipalities that we partner with annual contracts?
They are now, yes.
They are now. And are they on the same sort of, do they renew roughly at the same time?
Yeah, it's all school year. So
Okay,
they enter September 1st and run through June 30th.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Director Stewart?
I appreciate all the time that went into the preparation of your presentation. I know that we had some questions that came in from parents, I want to say Friday, I could be wrong on the date, pardon me, but that have specifically targeted certain areas, and it would be great if we could have, maybe John, if you can get back to us with the answers to those questions, because case in point was a question about pop-ins by the SROs to classrooms. Don't know. It seems it's been brought up, and that'd be rather disruptive if I dropped in, or anybody, or you dropped in, or for that matter, Santa Claus. Teaching in classes. Are we talking really teaching in classes, or are we talking guest speaker? Because if we're talking teaching, and again, that was one of the questions, what is their curriculum? Is there a set of objectives, so forth? It seems to me that from what I've heard in the past, it seems more like a guest speaker than a teaching. And I'd really like to have that clarified for us. That'd be great. How much training are our SROs given in dealing with non or low verbal students from our special education? And in that same vein, how much training are they given on speech generating devices? So basically they can have a conversation with a non or low verbal student.
I don't know the amount of time on the training, so I'll have to get back to you on that. But
I know our own staff is minimal.
Yeah.
And so, but it would seem to be, that would be an area, I know that we have at least one council person from one of the cities that is scared to death that the interaction will be with a gun and not communication. And she's off the wall. She is really very concerned, and she really couldn't get on beyond that. When you talked about commissioned officers, were you talking about the non-police officers, like the program they have in Redmond, where if the response calls for a mental health intervention, it's not the officer that shows up, but it's an officer and a mental health professional? Is that what you're talking about? I didn't know the difference between a commissioned officer and aside from a sergeant versus a lieutenant.
It would be not a police officer, so a non-commissioned. There are different categories that you can fall under.
Well, I
So
was
they
curious.
would not
you
be
know,
armed.
The Redmond does have an intervention program now that they send a social worker / mental health worker, whatever, when it sounds like the issue at hand is a mental health issue as opposed to a crime issue. And I wondered perhaps if that might be something we might want to take a look at as well.
Yeah, they do have a mental health professional on staff,
Yeah.
But there's one.
Yeah, I
And
know
so,
there's only one.
Yeah, it depends on the time.
I'm just thinking
Yeah.
in our own schools is what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
Okay.
Director Choi?
I just wanted to add to the education question that Director Stewart asked, whether or not those are prearranged by staff, and is there an opportunity for students to opt out during those periods?
I don't know the answer to that question. Sorry, but I will look into it for you.
Evan?
Okay, cool. This is a comment. I just wanted it to go on record as we are discussing alternatives to our SRO program. I can only speak from my personal experience. I say this with the knowledge that this might be more widely applicable to our district, but I would strongly advise that you look at my school, Juanita High School. We employ 2 people under, I believe the title is Safety and Prevention. And they have done a fantastic job through multiple avenues, and some of that is case specific. Particularly, one of them, Sammy, is also our strength and conditioning person. So he's done a really good job with our athletics and creating a culture of attendance and respect. But I would strongly advise, as we're considering this, to kind of go check out that program, because as a school that has historically had issues with SROs, we've moved very quickly away from that, and I think it's been for the benefit, because I've heard a lot less complaints in the past year.
Thanks, I really appreciate that feedback.
Any other questions or comments? All right, hearing none, I want to say thank you very much. Greatly appreciate that. Also wanted to highlight, and Deputy Superintendent Gillingham sort of brought that up, the additional work that has gone on with the supports to be able to be providing with the mental health, with the social workers, with the behavioral support specialists going on within these settings, to which to be able to complement that so that we can be having this discussion, because we do have those additional supports into place and can access those. So I do think that effort needs to be highlighted as to the work that has gone on with that, and thank you for coming forward with all of that. So we look forward to the follow-up information that you'll provide around the community engagement, and thank everybody who has come this evening as well for their comments and engagement, and look forward to continued conversation.
Sean, could you ask the teachers, the LWEA, what their perspective is on having the officers in school, just out of curiosity, to see what the teacher's perspective is. I'm curious, if they reflect the community more or less, if they reflect a broad spectrum, which very well may. I don't know. Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you. Now we will move on to monitoring results 3, which is life and global citizenship skills. So it's one of our 3 results that we do. This is the first time that we will be monitoring the new set of policies on this. So you will recognize that much of this we will not be discussing reasonable progress as much we'll be discussing the baseline of where we are at and sort of that. I'd also like to just highlight that we did have 3 questions for you to be thinking about as you did read through this, in regards to what your priorities might be, what strengths or opportunities you see in the data, as well as what questions might you have for students in regards to the data to go further or deeper into some of these things. So keep that in mind as the presentation comes, and then we will look for further discussion. So with that, I'll hand it off to you, I think.
You did a great job of leading into this, so thank you for that. The board did adopt a Results 3 policy a little while ago, and we then developed interpretation and indicators related to that. I think it should be noted that this presentation, this monitoring report, is presented to the board as reasonable progress with noted exceptions. And many of those exceptions come because this is the first cycle of reporting with this new policy and these new indicators. And so interpreting and truly providing the board with good analysis of these data were atypical, because typically we have trend data, we have a set of data that we can report from, and we have experience with the indicators over time. That's not true tonight, and the board is aware of that. I think the other piece that the board made an intentional decision around was to adopt the indicators for this monitoring cycle, and really the questions that were presented to you, and Deputy Superintendent Gillingham will review them, is really to kind of uncover what are the other types of data that will help us as we think about Results 3 life and global citizenship skills. And so Matt will walk us through a presentation related to the monitoring report. You all have the monitoring report both in board docs and I believe in front of you as well. So Matt?
All right, thank you, Dr. Holman, members of the board. So I am, I just have to admit, I'm a bit nervous presenting this because of all the work that, that we had engaged in over the past year in revising the policy, and with really a big part of the kind of the thrust of the reason that the board undertook that was to help create organizational clarity and alignment. And so, you know, I'm still very excited about the work that the board is engaged in, and I think that, and those kind of guiding questions that I'll revisit here with the board, are to help us continue to think about both that alignment and also, when we adopted the indicators, we also knew that that wasn't going to give us a complete picture of our progress. And so this gives us a great snapshot for us to be curious about. And it's also kind of with that idea of being curious that we want to enter in because it's that curiosity that will help us figure out what are the additional questions we should be asking, helping to figure out kind of what are some of those areas that jump out to us that as a board are priorities to you, so that ways we're thinking about how do we respond and lead this work with you know, with our principals and our teachers, that we're able to do so meaningfully. So the board, as we mentioned, the board adopted a new policy, and so here it is in changing that it's life and global citizenship skills. And the basis of this, the policy was really looking at the Washington State social emotional learning standards, and you know, that kind of taking that holistic whole child approach that is broken down into kind of two segments. One is thinking about the student and the skills that the student has in self-awareness, self-management, and self-efficacy, as well as the social skills. So social awareness, social management, and then social engagement. And so the board's policy greatly, that work greatly simplified and kind of clarified you know, what it is that we're hoping, the skills that we hope and are striving for that graduates from the school district will walk away from. And then that got us to this challenge of, well, how the heck do we know what we're doing? And one of the ways that we had been monitoring R3 was through found data that largely presented the absence of such skills. So we were looking at things like discipline data or attendance data with this kind of drawn out kind of thinking that if students aren't misbehaving, then they must have these skills. Or if students are coming to school, then they must have good work ethic. And we've explored as a board a lot of reasons why that was problematic, both from the kind of cultural competency and the assumptions that are made around there, as well as also that those are reflective in many ways of the adult behaviors. And so as we got into the reasonable interpretation, looking at kind of trying to define what those skills look like, that led us to start with, and you start with because we talked about the need to go beyond this, but to start with student perception data, and as an alternative to that kind of found data, and so we identified indicators in the Panorama survey, and that aligned as best as possible to the specific skills that the board has indicated in R3. And then with those indicators, we set 3 different sets of targets. One is that 90% of students' responses will be neutral or favorable. Just as a reminder, on the Panorama survey, it's a selected response,
And there's 5 choices. Panorama considers 2 of those choices favorable. One of them is a neutral, kind of a little bit of a shoulder shrug sort of response. And then there are 2 unfavorable responses. When we looked at this, depending on the way that the item was framed, you could get very different sorts of responses. And so as a way of kind of trying to align to get a sense of where are we at in relation to others, the board also selected that our student favorable responses would place us in the 90th percentile of districts. Additionally, and we don't have this data at this point, but this will be data that we will get over time, is looking at annual trends and particularly disaggregating that data and looking at the extent to which we're improving the experiences or the perception of our students of their skills for comparative groups. And I've talked over the last year a lot about the environmental context, and I'm want to reference back in the Washington State Social Emotional Implementation Guide. They have a section that really talks about this connection between skill development and the environment. And I think it's incredibly important for us, particularly as we're about to look at student data and disaggregated student data, to take the frame or the standpoint that that data is reflective of the extent to which we as the adults and as a school system are supporting or not supporting our students. And their responses are going to be influenced by perhaps a sense of safety or connection. And so when we look at like an OE10, to that learning environment, that's paying attention to that relationship is really important. And so, so social emotional learning and all learning is highly relational and contextual, and the environment in which we create and that people learn and engage in influences the extent degree or the degree to which that they will thrive. And so, so I just have to kind of like make sure that that's a disclaimer that. And that for, as our community is looking at this data, that this is really a reflection on us as the adults. And our challenge always is going to be how can we do better for our students? And we will see differences in our students' responses. And so, you know, big part of that is looking at the students' experience within the school setting. In August, at a study session, the board had an opportunity to hear from Director Johnny Fu, who's the Director of Student Services, and he presented a variety of different kind of programming efforts. And I know we're going to come back in the spring to kind of take those and show how those lay out in the context of the school setting. But I thought it was good to kind of crosswalk some of those programs that you heard about to the social emotional learning benchmarks. And so you can see a few of those, such as social emotional learning programming, the comprehensive school counseling programming, which might touch on all of those skills. Whereas other, you know, other programs like our behavioral health supports or PBIS might touch on just a few of those. And so actually engaged in this activity just because I wanted to have some curiosity if actually do we have some programming that's addressing each of these areas, and starting the process of again being intentional about mapping the programs and the services that we have to the outcomes that the board is expecting. All right, so I think I've stalled long enough. And I've given a lot of the disclaimers, but so when we talk about a key tenet of social emotional learning is that we take an asset-based approach, and so one of the things that we're really trying to do and wanting to model is look at what are the strengths in our students, what are the strengths in our teachers, what are the strengths in our schools. And so, so I want to lead with that, not to be a Pollyanna and to, you know, to kind of head off any sort of critique,
But it's a really good for us to, as we particularly look at this, to be curious and to kind of highlight. There are some things that at least that our students will reflect back to us that we're doing well. And so looking at that, calling that out also allows us to kind of be intentional around what are things that we could build off of. I've gone through the panorama data and I've identified, like for sense of belonging, that we have 9 schools that are really outliers in a positive way. And so I want to be spending time with them this year to kind of unpack what are some of the things that they're doing to make sure that we've got the types of supports in place to replicate those. While we have prioritized as a board and narrowed down from 11 items to 6, there's a lot of work ahead in all of these areas, and so if the board has areas of priorities, that would be certainly helpful to know and understand to inform the work that we're engaged in. And then we've all along talked about the importance of engaging students and unpacking this data. Survey data is a perception data that's often just a snapshot of how somebody felt in that moment. I honestly, feel a little ill-equipped to provide an analysis without student voice at that table. And so Director Tim Krieger, Director Pablo Ortega, Director Johnny Fu, and I have been meeting and starting to develop some protocols of how we can intentionally engage with students to unpack this data. We want to be really thoughtful of how we do that, because what we don't want to do is engage with our students in a transactional way that is kind of extractive. That's where we just go in, tell us what we want to hear, and then take off. But if the board has questions that are curiosity for students, it'd be good to know about that. So as we're designing those processes of engaging with students, that we can be thinking about how our students can share their experiences in such a way that we might satisfy some of that curiosity. So I'll just kind of holistically walk through each of these, and this takes all the data tables that it's in the monitoring report and simplifies it. So our first target was to look at the percent of students responding either neutrally or favorably to questions in these areas. So you can see that in elementary, this is representative of all students, that in the elementary schools, and actually for secondary as well, self-management, social awareness were the areas in which 90% or greater of our students responded favorably or neutrally. And you can also see that for self-efficacy and social management for our secondary students, that those were our lowest rated areas. I'll talk a little bit more about self-efficacy, because that was certainly one that I was a bit curious about, and have done some additional digging, and so I can speak a little bit more to that a little bit later. And then when we look at percentile, so percentile is based just on the favorable responses, and so one of the interesting things is that you can have in some of these areas a couple of 2 or 3% more favorable responses might actually put you into a completely different quintile. But we can see that our elementary students, our responses from our elementary students are consistently in the 80th percentile. And actually, when I went back and looked at the benchmarks, that the ranges that Panorama had provided me in the spring, they're very close in a couple of these areas. It's the high 80th percentile. So comparatively, nationally, our elementary schools are approaching the targets. Secondary, we have a little more work to do. This is not something that was called out in our monitoring report, and again, just comes from an area of curiosity, but I was curious about the variability in responses. In other words, I was wondering what are the items in which our students' responses are fairly similar regardless of how a student might identify, whether that's on the basis of gender, special education status, income status, or race.
Those are the areas that we disaggregate for this report. And so, so I went in digging for that. I just thought it would be interesting to share because I'm kind of under the thinking that the higher, the higher the range there, right, is representing kind of really, disproportionate experiences for our students. So you can see where the responses might be at the tightest is for our secondary students, social engagement. The largest range was in the area of race, and it was 5.2 points was the biggest gap for any group. But when we look at self-efficacy, that is the area both in elementary and secondary where we see the largest gaps in our students responding. In elementary, it's on the basis of whether or not they have an IEP. In secondary, it's on the basis of race. And so different racial, students identified different racially, we saw bigger gaps there. And so as we begin to kind of dig into and try to understand that it tells us that, at least for me, that the experiences of our students are significantly different where we have those larger gaps. While this was the first time for most of the items that we had asked these questions, there were three categories that we had asked. We asked this in the fall of 2021, and the fall of 2021, that was the same year, yeah. That's 21-22, sorry, pandemic brain for a second. So we're looking at the change within the context of a school year, so from fall to spring. Normally, the cycle we'll be in is we'll be comparing spring to spring. We do see student responses on surveys differently in the fall than in the spring. In some items, they tend to be more favorable in the fall, and then if you ask the same thing, they're less favorable in the spring, and in others, they're less favorable in the fall, and then by the time they get to know people, they're more favorable in the spring. And I say that, and I couldn't tell you where these fall in the category, but you can see for self-awareness that our elementary students, over the course of the school year, did increase their favorable response. Secondary students on all three measures, it was pretty much a wash. And social awareness increased a little slightly for our elementary students as well. All right, so we'll go briefly into each of the areas. And so you can see there's a board in the board monitoring report. There's a data table for each item. So for 3.1 emotional regulation, grades 3 through 5. This is disaggregated. Again, just as a reminder, so if an item is coded green, it means that is meeting the targets that the board has set. If it is yellow, means that we are approaching, we're within 10 points. And if it is red, it is further away from that. And so you can see where we have our students receiving special education services are from low-income houses, or students who identify as Black, African American, or Hispanic, Latino, are reporting that they are less favorable responses. And this question is, how well they perceive their ability to regulate their emotion. And we don't ask it to third graders that way, how well are you able to regulate their emotion? But it's things like when you get upset, how easily can you calm yourself down, those sorts of things. For 612, we begin to see some additional groups of students responding less favorably, and that the percentile is also lower as compared to our elementary students. I feel like I'm pointing out the negative when I had asked you all to point out or focus on the assets, but. So here we'll get to some perhaps some areas where we have some things to celebrate. So in self-management, and this is students' ability to regulate their emotions, thoughts, and behaviors in different situations.
we see a lot of students responding, student groups responding favorably, and other groups of students, students from low-income households, receiving special education services, or Black African American, very high, very close to approaching the targets that the board has set. For self-management, a lot of for secondary, self-management for secondary, similar, a lot of student groups reporting neutrally and favorably in excess of the board's targets, and other groups very close. The national favorable percentile, and this is one of the things when we look at the favorable ratings that's in the fourth column. And so you can see that favorable ratings are what's is used for the percentile. And so while neutral and favorable is fairly high for this one, favorable is a little bit less so. We look at self-efficacy in this. So self-efficacy, this is, the way the questions for this item are phrased are really from an academic context. So how well do you think you can, complete your homework, or you're going to remember what was taught last year? Questions like that is what the students are responding to. And so you can see we have fewer groups responding neutrally or favorably here, and a couple of groups that are further away from the targets. And you can see at secondary that our students indicate much less confidence around their ability to achieve succeed and achieve academic outcomes. This one was really curious because when we think about how incredible our students are, and across the board, this one was one that stood out to me that I was very curious about. One group that we don't disaggregate for the report is students who have qualified for highly capable programs. And so I went in and spent some time looking at that, and we see a big gap. Actually, our students who have qualified for highly capable programs respond at what would be the 90th percentile. So there's some interesting things and further conversations probably to be had with our students around that kind of gap of what I think many adults that get to work with students might perceive as their ability to be successful, and what our students are telling them about their feelings about being successful. And again, this is a great example of really needing to engage with student voice to really understand why that is. And, and I don't want to dismiss it. It could also have been maybe we were doing this during, testing. Schools were doing this during testing, and it wasn't perhaps a great time. I don't know, and we'll have to dig into it, but it's certainly an area of significant curiosity. Social awareness, this is how well you consider perspectives of others and empathize with them. Again, a lot of favorable responses at the elementary level. And I think about our elementary social emotional learning programs, such as Second Step, the areas where our students are responding the most favorably. Also, there's a lot of correlation to the types of conversations that we're having with students and the opportunities for practice there. So. Social awareness generally, students are, when we look at their responses, neutral or favorable, is generally fairly high. When we look at their favorable responses and in against the national percentile is we would be middle of the pack there. And so, again, kind of an interesting kind of curiosity around that. Social management. So the next for 3.5 and 3.6, we don't have any we don't have any indicators for our elementary students. The survey items that we selected are ones that are only available to secondary students. And so for social management, and what we are using is the Cultural Awareness and Action Surveys. And this is a percent of students reporting positively as their preparedness for discussing and confronting issues of race, ethnicity, and culture in school on the survey. This would be one that I believe that, and when we look at like OE14, we've been asking our educators around their sense of self-efficacy in engaging in these conversations as well. And so, this is one of those where it's like if our students are reporting to us lower levels of neutral and favorable, that's also looking at what are the opportunities we're having to have them be able to practice and safely engage or bravely engage in those conversations. And what is the preparedness or level of the adults that are charged with helping to facilitate those conversations. So this being one of those examples where there's cross-referencing with our operational expectations and looking at the kind of from an environmental standpoint, how that relates. And so as we go to monitor OE14 and OE10 this year, we'll try to bring those back to that connection to what our students are telling us about their experience there. In social engagement, this is one where students were responding to the extent to which they consider the perspective of their teachers. And I believe this was one that we had some great conversations with of whether this was the survey was the right one that we wanted for this, and we couldn't find any other one, but it's still, I think, is interesting. We can see that our secondary students are responding less favorably on this. All right, so bring it back. It's an opportunity for the board to have a conversation around the R3.
So we will go if you have questions or clarification in any of those pieces. So Director Choi, it looks like you do.
Thank you. I'm excited to dig into this data for the very first time. I have a few questions and a couple of ideas as well. I guess opportunities for the data for the future. The first would be, when I was reading through the data, especially because I'm reminding myself that this is a voluntary survey that our students are opting to take and participate in, I think that it would be helpful to level set potentially what the numbers are actually telling us. So having some sort of an indicator of the sample that we are looking at, if it's an accurate representation of our student body. So when we say that we have, I'm just looking at 3.6, the N, right? All of the students for 6 through 12, we had 8,801 students in this data set. What percentage of that is that of our total student body of grades 6 through 12? So is this data 10% of our student body? Is it 80% of our student body? And then I think it would also be helpful to look at it disaggregated as well, that proportion. Mainly because it's an opt-in survey. I can keep going. Or I can give somebody else a turn.
Go ahead and just keep going. Just as easy.
So then I was trying to think of other methods in which we could look for indicators of some of these instead of solely looking at just the panorama survey. And a couple of things are popping in my brain, but I'm just gonna put them out there. So one was for 3.6, when you were talking, it's asking about the perspective of the teachers, of their teachers, correct? I'm curious, is it worth asking the question before of whether or not that student has a teacher that they can relate to, either if it's race, a teacher of the same race, a teacher who has similar, whatever it is. I believe that's a little bit more concrete data that we could potentially see whether or not there's a correlation to the panorama results. And then another one I was thinking of was for social engagement as well. Also trying to look for like concrete data that we could look at, participation in extracurricular activities or affinity spaces by the students that are responding to these questions, and seeing whether or not there is a correlation between whether or not, if they do particularly participate in extracurriculars and then respond favorably to social engagement, then that's a very concrete next step that we can try to take to create more opportunities for extracurriculars or affinity spaces for these groups to improve their social engagement, correct? So something like that. I think that's all I had for now.
Yeah, and I'll, just to maybe validate, I think one of the things, you talked about that sense of belonging, the adult connection. So for example, for social engagement, you'll see that multilingual learners respond more favorably than non-multilingual learners. When we ask questions around sense of belonging, and historically, our multilingual learners respond more favorably to the question of, do you have an adult that you're connected with at school? And so that you would perceive that there would be that connection between, certainly between the two. So I know we're looking at like engagement and activities for the OEs, and so hopefully over time we can strengthen those connections between these reports.
Any additional questions? Okay. So Director Stewart, I know you did.
I don't want to make you too concerned, but I would like to go back to page 1. That doesn't mean I have a question for each of your slides, but on page 1, or slide 1, you referred to the fact that that 90% was neutral or favorable. Was that, there it is. Do we know how that breaks out of curiosity? Because if it's 50-50, I don't care. If the neutral is 80 and it's 20 for favorable, putting them together, it kind of bothers me. You see where I'm going?
Yeah. I don't want to yell at you. I'll just use the mic. So the way that you would look at that we could, it's not explicitly done up here, but so if we look at the all column here, 82.4% of our students in 3rd or 5th grade responded neutrally or favorably. 51.3% of them responded favorably.
Okay.
So 31.1% of our students responded in that neutral category. Okay. And generally we see higher levels of neutral responses from our secondary students. You know, looking at them, in some cases, we will see an increase in favorability. That wasn't part of the full analysis that we did to kind of look at it, and I'm looking at it, and as I was kind of trying to track things, the movement was fairly small between levels and looking at that, so I don't know that there's anything I'd call
Perfect.
out.
Answers my question.
Yeah.
Just wondered, what's been Panorama's response to our inquiries as far as to make to be able to compare to similar districts as opposed to just a national blanket number?
So they have, so the way their response has been is that you can build that into essentially a slicer in their tool, where we would need to go through and can compare to districts on the basis of urban or rural, or on the basis of the socioeconomic status. And so their response has been to build that out and say kind of like we could go and do that analysis or comparison to ourselves.
It's, that kind of breakout is good, but I was also thinking of the idea districts that are, have 30,000 kids who basically cover X amount of territory, trying to get a feel for something that looks about the size that we have as opposed to, say, the Tri-Cities, something small. Because it seems to me that that might make a big difference on the response, especially when we were comparing it, when all of a sudden we get national responses where it's 40% and we're getting 80. It just seems like that might be a problem. Also, when we ask about social engagement, when we ask about participating in extracurriculars, remind me, are we asking about, when we ask that question, are we asking also, do you have an after-school job or before-school job for that matter? Because I think that would have a high impact on whether they're doing extracurriculars or not, to be quite frank.
Yeah, we don't ask, for the purposes of monitoring or in Panorama, we don't ask students that question set. Right now, the data set that we have around student participation is just athletics registration. So one of the things, sorry, Director Steer, one of the things that we'll be exploring is our students participate in a variety of activities, many of which aren't necessarily formally registered. So students who participate in an affinity group, students who participate in after-school clubs, and that recognition of there are students who participate either whether it's in jobs or they're participating in community programs. Those would all be things that we would look at and say those are protective factors that help build kind of the social skills of students, whether we're directly involved in it. We don't have a mechanism for measuring that right now, and certainly I know that's been a part of our ongoing kind of conversation, is this recognition that that for some of our students that there's, the school is one component of that. We did participate in a collaborative with Eastside Pathways this past year around social emotional learning, and part of that work was to try to develop a bit of a community framework and recognizing that while we are an important part of the life, in the lives of our children, we're not the only part, and that there's other community partners that also have the opportunity to help students thrive in developing their social emotional skills. So,
The reason why I asked earlier was asked the idea of if we've got this kind of response on extracurriculars, how can we increase the participation in the extracurriculars? I'm thinking that with certain groups, whether it's low income, whatever, you're not going to be, regardless of how attractive those prospects are, if they're holding down jobs, if they're looking after siblings, it ain't going to happen.
Director Liberty.
So one of the essential questions, well, never mind, this was not an essential question, but I'm going to say it anyway. I'm going to reframe it. I just want to say, first of all, I think I'm pleased that this report, for the first time since we've ever monitored R3, is actually, I feel, telling us something that is actionable as a board member. So that's nice to see. Some of the data itself is very troubling, but what's helpful about this is you look at this as you talk about what are some strengths, weaknesses, what should we prioritize. Well, all of it just kind of pops off the page right away. So I'm not going to repeat the things that are plain and obvious. Well, I will. The priorities, it's secondary, right? One narrative that you could tell from this data is that the longer kids interact with our system, the worse a lot of these measures are, right? The more time they, if we were to be uncharitable, the more time they spend with us, the more problematic the data is. In particular, so I guess in terms of priorities, the one that really just popped out to me is the same thing that you flagged, Matt, which was self-efficacy for for our secondary students. And in particular, some of the gaps there are particularly troubling, and I'm having a hard time pulling that up. Can you switch over to it? Right. For our students of color, that's where we see some of the largest gaps too. And I don't have any thoughts on how to unpack this, other than this is, to me, when I look at what is the priority, we're 30th percentile nationally. We have extremely large gaps for our students of color. I mean, this is the area of priority that I would prioritize or recommend the district prioritize. I'm just going to keep going if that's okay. I'm going to get to a question. You can cut me off whenever you want, Director Bleasner.
It is okay, Director Laliberte.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Could you go to social management, the social management slide for secondary 6 through 12? So we're measuring social management and its percent of students reporting positively as their preparedness for discussing and confronting issues of race, ethnicity, and culture in school in school. This is the one where one of the questions was, what would you want to unpack with students? And to me, this is the one, because when I look at the data, we have a fairly large gap between for our Black students and other students. And I wonder, I have some wonders around this. I mean, are students reporting this because of the environment that we are providing for which they can have these discussions, or is it because they don't feel that we're providing them the skills to have this, or both, right? So, I mean, those are some of the wonders I have, and would like to hear more from our students as to why they are reporting this. Is it the context of in which the conversations would occur, or is it the skills that we're providing them? And then I have a question on the data and then I'll wrap up. I noticed for a few of these, so for social awareness for 6 through 12, we're in the 50th percentile nationally, but it's, you look at the data and for all students it's 90%, and it's not too dissimilar for what the social awareness is for the social awareness neutral and favorables are for all students for 3 through 5, but there we're in the 80th percentile. So to me, it suggests that is it quintile? I don't know, the bands that are all pretty close together. Is that a fair? That basically, essentially a few percent, 1% could move you from 50th to 70th for.
Yeah, on this one, I'm looking at my handwritten notes, and I only made a note on what that gap was for elementary.
Yeah.
The 90th percentile in this for elementary favorable, if our students would have, 76% of our students versus 73% of our students would have responded favorably.
Yeah.
We would have been in the 90th percentile. So, yeah, for some of these, and I think it's secondary when I looked at them, the distance between kind of mediocrity and excellence was fairly narrow in terms of that kind of response. That said, this is still new to us, and what we have seen in some, because Panorama is not new to us, and what we have seen is that some of these things evolve over time, and particularly for some of the newer measures. So one of the newer measures is these questions asking our students around race. Racialized conversations is a newer measure, so it would not surprise me if what's considered in the 90th percentile changes as more districts engage in that, as it becomes a larger sample size.
Oh, I see. Okay. I don't know what to do with that, I guess. I was very focused on the national percentiles, but I think how you phrased the difference between mediocrity and excellence is slim. I just don't know it's hard for me to know what to do with that looking at the report. That's mostly a comment. Okay, thank you.
I just wanted, Director Laliberte, you made a comment about the one way to interpret the data is that the longer a student has been in our system. And I want to offer an alternative perspective. While that could be true, I'm not saying it isn't, and I see some of these data and they're, I actually pulled up the report the moment it was sent to us, the day it was sent to us, and I landed on a few of these and was greatly concerned. I also, we are not comparing a student's experience over time. This is one snapshot of our entire system, and I know our students have had a unique experience through the pandemic. And I'm not saying that that is the factor. I just want to caution the interpretation of the entire system on a single data set, while being open to interpretations that also do relate to the system. Because I also see consistently we have student groups that are reporting lower favorable ratings consistently across the board, which to me that does speak to the system. So I just wanted to offer that as well.
Seems like adolescents might play a part in that too, as opposed to being how long they've been with the school system.
Thank you. Director Carlson.
So I think you're almost on the slide of interest to me. So slides 18 and 19 are going to be the 3.3 self-efficacy. So this is fascinating to me. And it's the first thing I want to point out is something that if you look at the proportion favorable in grades 3 through 5, so not the highlighted column, and you ask, comparing black against white, which is one of my first comparisons that I tend to jump to, 60.1% versus 61.4% favorable. And self-efficacy is believing in your ability to succeed in school. These numbers are not different in 3rd through 5th grade. Now flip forward to the next slide. Black African American, 34%. White, 47.7%. There's a very significant difference here. It is something meaningful to those numbers under one assumption, and that is that the data are not in any way biased by who answered the questions. That's something where Director Choi had pointed out early on, knowing the denominator, how many kids didn't answer the questions, matters a lot in interpreting these data. Because if this is something where kids are biased to answer the questions based on whether they are happy or unhappy with the system, that could very much lead to concerns. But nonetheless, setting aside the potential for bias, if this is unbiased, it's a fascinating data point that our black students would be losing confidence and that they didn't start with differential confidence in their ability, which I think is a very important finding relative to, I mean, the outcome at 6 through 12 matters a lot, but at 3 through 5, okay, how do we keep that? So there are many ways to interpret a data set that you know to be incomplete, and I don't want to over-interpret this data. But that said, the 3 through 5 data gives me some hope about some of the gaps that we're coping with, particularly, and it makes me believe in some of the gaps that we've been measuring. I mean, if you map this against actual student performance, these numbers are not all that dissimilar. It is fascinating that all groups have a significant decrease in their confidence by 6 through 12. 3rd through 5th graders, they're much more confident they can succeed than our older students. And that drop relative to the nation, this may be the curse of high standards, that we have a local setting for what is success that is internalized by our students. So anyway, I'm fascinated by these data. I don't want to keep us here any later than we already are. But that's the one piece of this analysis that I really wanted to draw your attention to because it's very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Evan.
Okay, I promise to keep this short. So if we could go to self-efficacy for 6 through 12, Speaking from a student perspective, you start to think, what is changing between our primary experience and our secondary experience? And the first thing that jumps into my head, because this is a recent conversation I had, is the moment kids get into middle school, we start having diverging tracks. And while that obviously is a educational necessity in some aspects, I was talking to a student the other day who was talking about how stressed they were in math. They're in upper level AP math class now, and they do not feel prepared for it. They do not feel confident in it. They would not rate themselves high on this scale. And I asked them, well, when do you feel that this became an issue? And they looked at me and they said, well, I tested into 7th grade math. And once you test into 7th grade math, you take advanced 7th grade math. And that's not a choice. And once you are set on that high track, when do you get off? At what point do you manage, and it comes back to that internalized idea of success, at what point do you manage to convince yourself and your family that you have to get off this track? Because some kids are really strong in math when it's algebra, but then you get to AP calculus, AB, and that is an entirely different world. And they are not prepared for it. And I think that has been stressed by the pandemic. But as we are considering the self-efficacy and our students' own confidence, I think that this district has a bit of an issue with a great what's next kind of attitude, where, great, you're good, you got good scores in this grade, congratulations, now you get to take a harder class, and there's never a point where I feel maybe we are celebrating or we are offering a way off of that track, because at some point, some of those kids are going to derail. And finally, I want to take you through kind of the experience of a student here for just a second. So in the district, generally we have a policy of 90% tests, 10% homework. I don't know exactly if that's a district level thing, but I also know that both of us, the majority of our classes, are structured in that way. So let's say that you have 100% on that 10% like homework and assignments category. That's going to get you about 10 points. Now let's say you've taken 3 tests that semester. You got a 100, a 95, and a 96. That would average you out to a 97.3 as your grade total. Let's say you had a really bad week and you bombed the next test and you got an 80. An 80 is not an incredibly bad score. Your grade point average dropped to a 93.475. That is a 4% drop. And in a district where we have an incredibly high amount of high-achieving children who have been high-achieving for an extremely long period of time, that 4% drop, which takes them from a comfortable plus 95%, where they feel they have a cushion, into that danger zone where you're worried about losing your A, that is significant. So this is not me saying that we need to change the way we're looking at grading. This is me saying, as we continue looking at the way we instill confidence in our students, is that system instilling confidence, or is it creating a system where the moment you get done with one test, the immediate worry is on the next one, because there is no point where you feel comfortable in how you're doing? That's all.
And Shivani?
I kind of wanted to add on to what Evan was saying, but that is true. Like, we highly prioritize test-based learning, which isn't exactly how all students learn throughout the district. So basically, judging them on that scale can also lead to lower confidence and like lower self-management and just like being able to, work. And so I think that maybe it would be helpful to like look at different ways that we can implement like extracurriculars or some kind of project-based learning into our schools, because that would also improve social management skills.
I'm gonna grab this for one more second. Apologies. As we're talking about that, I also wanted to bring up the idea of having a higher value on improvement throughout the year. Currently, with the way our structure sets up, like I just showed you, one bad test can be significantly detrimental to your grade, and there is no system within our school district that provides any sort of, it doesn't even have to be an official grade buoy, but any sort of prioritization on the idea of improvement. So when we're thinking about students' confidence, if you shoot down their confidence early with one bad test score, how can we rebuild that? Because as much as we can say that we're trying to teach students that they are more than grades, that's a larger cultural issue, and I think there comes a point where we also need to work within that.
Thank you. All right, Director LaLiberty.
I forgot to flag the areas of strength, which was one of the prompts and the questions. I made the mistake of focusing on the areas for opportunity and growth, but I did not flag the areas of strength. It's clear that what we are doing in K through 5 is working. I mean, the data is good. The data, I mean, a lot of these were in the 80th percentile, but given that it's in high 90s for a lot of this, it seems pretty clear to me that if we're to move 0.3%, we're probably in the 90th percentile. That appears to be working, and it's not just working for all students, but you see a smaller, as Director Carlson flagged, for almost all of these, you see a smaller gap when you disaggregate between our different groups of students. So, yes, I wanted to get that on the record for the report that Director Blesner is furiously typing next to me. And yes, that was it. So I just wanted to make sure I said that.
So what I would just like to throw, we haven't actually moved to an motion for approval, but because this was sort of in a different ballgame as many of them, I wasn't going to be so concerned about following that process, because I think these questions were sort of key to think about. So I would toss those back out just to make sure, much as Director LaLiberty has said. So what areas would you might prioritize as you look through that, if you don't feel that's been clear? I've heard self-efficacy come out pretty strongly from several. And that component and the discussion around homework policy and grading and that approach and how that could be impacting in different pieces. So that seems like an area to dig into of potential data components. Any other areas you would prioritize and what you've seen here? Secondary was the other piece that was put out.
Yeah, I was going to say secondary, but it's really hard for me to pick an area to prioritize, because I think it's really hard to interpret the data without the baseline of what are we actually looking at. Because if we did the analysis and broke it out, disaggregated it, and looked at the actual student population and the percentages correlated, right? Then I think we can take this data and say this means X, Y, and Z. But without that information, it's really difficult to say whether or not we're looking at an accurate representation of our student body and therefore where we should prioritize. I think without that, it's pretty difficult.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, the actual Panorama survey data information that's online does give that breakout specifically in regards to the demographics. I just remember seeing it. I was just looking through it. There is so that's something we should be able to get.
Does it compare it to our district by 6th through 12th grade and by 3rd through 5th? It does?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I didn't see it.
It divides it out. But that would be something I assume that is feasible to do. Is that fair? No. Oh, look at Matt. Matt's going, no.
Well, because
It's
I'd
10:15.
turn around and be looking at Director Krieger. The data service scientists are building out some additional tools for us, and so they've mocked up some things that I've been playing around with, but not quite ready for production. So I think this sort of feedback of how do we, when we're using perception data, to be able to use it with confidence. That some other things will be over time looking at trend. I would suggest that areas of priorities at this point in time could also be what should we be from this, what would be things that we'd be most curious about, so we can prioritize trying to explore further. And because I think we've heard that you could reach multiple conclusions that might all be potentially valid, from a single data set, or completely invalid from that same data set. So, so I think that's what we'd be looking at is, we know that there's more work to be done to try to understand our students' experience with respect to R3, and the perception data is just a start.
I just have a few comments I'd like to make. So appreciate the conversation that took place. I think it's great and being able to look through some of this. I will say the self-efficacy was definitely the one that jumped out. And I did think about expectations and homework and those pieces as to how we might be influencing that through our system. So those would be interesting pieces to dive into a little bit, especially that shift from elementary to secondary. So I could see that as well. Greatly appreciated the approach. This is the first time R3 has been useful. Recognize that there's still limitations to data, but often we never have all the data we want to be able to make decisions, but we are only policy, and so luckily we can make decisions with perhaps less exact data that we need, as we're not doing a medicine, so that's beneficial. There were a few questions. I'd be interested in knowing the districts that are involved in the Panorama Survey, what is their range of size? I did some looking to try to see if I could figure that out and wasn't able to. So I'm just curious as to who are the districts that are included, just to sort of get an idea. Also, is there a way to break out the grade levels? Because I do wonder about, especially as minimum middle school and high school, having those combined, but there are such major transition points in there and developmental stages going on. That's going to influence all of this. And we see it with our Healthy Youth Survey. We see that trend differently over time. I would assume we might see it differently here. I also appreciated a comment you sort of tossed in during your presentation. It's not written anywhere, which was you looked at it geographically and by schools to see if there were any that were really outperforming what we were seeing elsewhere. And I think that's something that would be great to continue to do, so that if there's an area that really gets self-efficacy and all those kids at Juanita High School are thriving in some way, well, what is it that's going on in that way that we want to be able to build? So I appreciate you already starting to do that. I don't know how that gets represented in the report, but I do think we are blessed that we are such a large district that we do have capacity to do comparison. And I don't say comparison from a judgment side, it's from that learning curiosity side. How do we bring that forward and bring out the highlights of what's going really well? So I just wanted to highlight that. You kind of tossed it in at us at one point, but I think it was great work in being able to do that sort of dive into the data. Director Carlson.
And I'll make this brief, given the hour. One other ask in terms of further analyses. Is it possible to break out 3 through 5 and 6 through 12 literally by grade band?
That is some of the work that our data scientists are doing. Is extracting the data from Panorama so that we can essentially build our own dashboard.
The reason I asked that question is that in self-efficacy, in the 3 through 5 grade band, between races, there's not a difference. Between two specific groups, students who are low income and students who are not low income, and students who are special education and not special education, a gap has already emerged. And interestingly, that gap closes as you go to 6 through 12. So I'm very curious about, is this something where in 3rd grade there's already a gap? My suspicion is that kids in special education have already internalized self-efficacy relative to the system, been told that they're not succeeding. And this is something I'm very interested in understanding at a finer grain level. Thank you.
Like a motion?
Yes. I'm going to entertain a motion at this point in time.
Okay. I move approval of the results 3 monitoring report as presented, which is reasonable progress with the exceptions that are noted in the report and were discussed this evening.
Second.
All right, it has been moved and seconded to approve the report as presented with the noted exceptions. It is now 10:30. So with that, is there any further discussion?
Yeah, thanks. Oh, we lost our speakers, so I guess not. Yeah.
Okay, no further discussion. I would like to say thank you for the discussion that took place and the engagement with what was there and being able to, I think it provides lots of opportunities going forward. Again, as was stated, it's a little hard from a baseline standpoint, where are we at, but I think it gives us good information to work from, and we have more. So if anything comes as you think of things, we can always add and amend as we go forward too. So that's the piece to think about if something comes forward. So with that, I will now take a vote to approve the report as presented. All those in favor, please signify by voting aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. So thank you very much for getting that done.
OE4 monitoring.
I was going to actually make a suggestion that we just table OE4 for next week and put it or until the next meeting. Everybody in favor of tabling
Well, it's just
that?
the summary report. It's just the summary report.
Okay, so you want to just do it? All right.
And I had no issues with the summary report.
Okay, so we will go ahead to the next item on the
Approval
agenda.
of the summary report for OE4.
Second.
I have entertained a motion already to approve the monitoring report for OE4 as presented. I would like to say it is being presented as in compliance with the noted exceptions as put forward of the specific sub-policies that were put there. And Dr. Holman, you have something you'd like to add?
It's already been,
Yes, I was just saying what the summary was.
yes, okay.
Yeah, I'm with you. This is just the summary of the discussion, if you've all had a chance to read it and agree with it, and no questions on it. It just sort of summarized what we had done. All right, all those in favor, please signify by voting aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Moving on, Superintendent Report, Dr. Holman.
I'll provide a brief report this evening and probably put some additional information in writing. At our next board meeting, the board will monitor OE14. And as you know, the journey that you have been on to adopt this policy. This is, as we're going through OE14, there are 55 indicators of compliance within OE14. And a number of them are really setting in place work to be done, either processes to be in place, data sets to be collected. And so it's more of just a heads up that you'll receive OE14 it's either this Thursday or the following Thursday. And there are areas where we just don't have data sets to even attempt to report. We knew that going into this, but as I read through it, it just was a reminder to me that this is a process that we're in. The majority of it has data sets, but a lot of this really was the board really leading through policy. I mean, truly. And so there's work being done to implement processes, procedures, ensure the system is aligned, make sure we have data, or figure out how we're going to collect the data that the board has requested. But I'm excited that we're at this place where we're actually monitoring OE14. Feels like it's been about a 3-year process to get here. And so the board will receive that report in the coming weeks, and then we'll have discussion at the next meeting. So I'll put some additional, and as we're going through it, I think you saw last week, there's a couple of odd wording pieces that need to be updated. I'll work with President Bleasner to make sure that we update those correctly, but there's a not missing that really does change the the phraseology, and just a couple of pieces like that as we go through it. So, but excited about this and really appreciate the board's work around OE14.
Wonderful, thank you. So the next item is on the agenda is Public and Community Affairs. Director Stewart, do you have anything you'd like to report?
I think we covered it pretty much during the study session. I have been trying to attend as many of the candidate forums as possible just to keep in touch with folks. And it's often during August, it's been surrogates. So anyway.
All right, thank you. And so the next item is board member comments. Director Carlson.
Just very briefly, relative to the grading questions, I think that there's something in the works that was independent of tonight's conversation around standardized grading policies in the district. When do we expect that, do you know?
I'll try and provide that next week. Yep.
All right, any other board comments? All right, hearing none, just to make people aware, the board will be meeting next on October 3rd at 5 p.m. for the study session, and then our board meeting will be at 7 p.m. that evening. Following that in October, we'll have one on the 17th, also at 5 and 7. With that, I will now entertain a motion to adjourn the September 12th, 2022 board meeting.
So moved.
Second?
It has been moved and seconded that we adjourn. All those in favor, please signify by voting aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Meeting is now adjourned.
Excellent.